This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's been reported in Israel in the last sort of 24 hours that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, systematically torpedoed or sabotaged negotiations designed to secure the release of the hostages. I don't know whether or not that will demand rather more attention in this country from the media in this country in the coming hours, in the coming day or not. And I don't at the moment have the full detail. I've got the report in Haaretz, which is an Israeli media organisation. The accusation essentially is that he improperly disclosed classified intelligence so as to scuttle hostage release deals, among other things, leaking data on Palestinian prisoners' release in order to manipulate public opinion. And this is these allegations have been made by Israel's actual negotiating team, members of Israel's actual negotiating team. Speaking to a Haaretz journalist. I just want to get that front and centre in the first place. On a personal level, today is one of those days where I naively dream of not being accused simultaneously of rancid anti-Semitism and having the blood of Palestinian children on my hands. By, I imagine, 10:30 today, my inbox will be pinging with both of those ridiculous assertions, which is an indication perhaps of how hard it is to conduct this conversation, and also perhaps of why we don't do it as often as we should. I think sometimes that the accusations of anti-Semitism are designed to stop us talking about it, and I think that the accusations of having the blood of Palestinian children on your hands are not. I think that, but although equally ludicrous, I think the motivation for those responses is actually different, but that perhaps is a little bit moot for current purposes. I believe now, for the avoidance of any doubt whatsoever, that the actions of Israel, of the Israeli Defense Force in the Gaza Strip, became, at a point in the recent past that I cannot precisely pinpoint, became unconscionable, became obscene. It is for judges and courts to decide whether or not they have become genocidal, but the idea that pursuing some 20,000 terrorists somehow justifies the dislocation and destruction of some 2 million lives and the killing of almost 40,000 humans, mostly women and children, is absolutely inconceivable, the notion of justification. Philosophically, ethically, the problem is that after the October the 7th terror attack, there was a clear and, to me at least, inarguable need for Israel to respond robustly. I mean, the worse the response becomes, the more I wonder whether that was the right opinion to hold at the time. But anybody who thinks that what is happening now and what has happened since that unspecified moment at which it became, quotes, too much, end quotes, or disproportionate, anybody defending that is complicit in mass murder, in my view, or is at least supporting it. Which brings us to the British government. I want to play you an interview that Jonathan Ashworth has given in the last few hours, an interview in which he describes some of the experiences he had while losing his seat to a political opponent in Leicester South, campaigning more or less exclusively on the issue of Gaza. Just have a little listen to this before we proceed.
I've never known a campaign of such vitriol, such bullying, such intimidation. I've never seen a Member of Parliament, Shokat Adam Patel, get elected on the basis of a foul and obnoxious lie that I was responsible for genocide, that I had the blood of Gazan children on my hands. This was his campaign. I had his supporters bullying and intimidating myself and my key supporters in the streets, and he refuses to condemn it. He's actually gone to ground and he's refusing to answer any questions on this. It's very disrespectful to the people of Leicester South that he's disappeared. But look, there should be no place for bullying and intimidation in politics. And some people have said, oh, don't speak out, it looks like sour grapes. I'm a northern lad. I'm from a different bit of Greater Manchester than you, but we were taught to stand up to bullies, and that's what I'll always do.
OK, and you have gone on record to say that some of his supporters are questionable.
Well, yeah, well, there's now a legal case, so we perhaps ought to...
tiptoe through that.
Tiptoe through that, but that in itself, I think, tells you something. OK,
well, a spokesman for...
a spokesperson,
MP.
not even him,
yeah.
a spokesperson.
Yeah.
Why can't he answer questions? Why isn't he sat here asking questions?
We'll try. Shawkat was elected by a diverse coalition of voters in Leicester South. He's focused on delivering for his constituents and will not be distracted by sour grapes from a beaten rival whose divisive politics were resoundingly rejected at the ballot box.
He is focusing on keeping his head down and running away from scrutiny. He should be sat in this chair answering simple, straightforward questions about the conduct of his campaign. But look, it is what it is now. He's won. I think he's already letting down the people of Leicester South, and he won't be able to deliver change. The improvements in Leicester South to our National Health Service, to the cost of living, to our schools will be because of a Labour government, not an impotent, independent opposition MP. But we've got to speak up against this intimidation. It wasn't just me. You saw brilliant women like Shabana Mahmood, Jess Phillips, intimidated and barracked. They stood up to the bullies, and I'm so pleased that those two women, who are absolutely excellent MPs, are in a Labour government.
Well, of course, we've asked for him to come on the...
And the reference that Jonathan Ashworth makes obliquely there is to a man who celebrated the victory of Shawkat Adam over Jonathan Ashworth in Leicester South, being charged overnight with a terrorism offence. He mentioned Jess Phillips and Shabana Mahmood. Let's have a little listen to what happened at the count, the announcement of the result in Jess Phillips's constituency of Birmingham Yardley.
Phillips, Jessica Rose, known as Jess Phillips, Labour Party, 11,275. Total number of rejected ballot papers is 120. Excuse me. Thank you. Number of rejected ballot papers is 128. This represents a majority of 693, with a turnout of 49.5%. I therefore do hereby declare that Phillips Jessica Rose, known as Jess Phillips, is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Yardley constituency.
Well, a very close thing for Jess Phillips.
11 minutes after 10, as you can tell, we borrowed that coverage from the BBC, for which we're very grateful, of course. So there's something that needs to be stated fairly explicitly. It is absolutely obscene to accuse Labour politicians of being complicit in genocide or having blood on their hands, because even if the Labour Party in opposition had called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be put on trial in The Hague last week, it wouldn't have made the blindest bit of difference to anything. So feelings run extremely high, obviously, but those accusations are more about, I think, sometimes the self-righteousness of the accuser than they are about the culpability of the accused. However, Keir Starmer's challenge now is to do something meaningful in power that he could not have done in opposition. And he's already made it clear that he is committed to a two-state solution. He has already called for a ceasefire, and he has already stressed the importance of retaining a relationship with the State of Israel. I don't know if it's possible to do all three of those things. I really don't. But I know that he has to try. So there are two questions here. How big a problem is Gaza for the Labour government? To which the answer is, I think, not very big, actually, in the context of politics, in the context of domestic politics. They lost a couple of seats, and they came very close to losing a couple more. Wes Streeting and Jess Phillips, both very, very close to being toppled by a pro-Gaza activist. And I don't use that as a pejorative. I think that's a helpful and a simple statement. But what he can do as Prime Minister, of course, cannot be cloaked or camouflaged in the language of impotence. He is no longer impotent. Or is he? I mean, he can call for a ceasefire until he's blue in the face. So what should the Labour government policy towards Israel regarding Gaza be? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. I don't know what question to ask you to dig into the actions of the kind of people intimidating Jess Phillips or bullying Jonathan Ashworth on the streets of Leicester South. I mean, it doesn't go back to the ceasefire, by the way. It doesn't go back to Keir Starmer's deeply unfortunate comments on this radio station, which he tried at least to very, very quickly clarify and withdraw. But I'm afraid they were halfway around the world before the clarifications and withdrawals had got their trousers on about Israel somehow having the right to withhold electricity and water from Gaza, which would, as he would know as a lawyer, be an absolute definition of a war crime. I can tell you, for example, in Leicester South, that someone who campaigned there in 2004 describes to me, in a private note, voter intimidation that was enormous. A Liberal Democrat candidate who was a Sikh won, but it was a vitriolic campaign largely aimed at Labour. So it's certainly not linked exclusively to the current crisis in Gaza, the current carnage in Gaza, or the failure of Labour to call quickly enough in the eyes of many people for a ceasefire. But what you have in place now is an explicit call for a ceasefire from Israel and an explicit commitment from Keir Starmer to a two-state solution for the Palestinian people. And that question that hangs over all of this now then is, what do you want him to do? And I ask this, it doesn't happen very often, I ask this in the hope that you will say something to me that makes me think, oh yes, that is now my opinion. That is now my opinion. What do you want Keir Starmer to do? Because, let me read you this from Richard. You are a rabid anti-Semite. What's the name of the hostage negotiation team that claims the hostages would have been released? Or is it an anonymous quote from an extreme left-wing page? Yada, 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 yada. And equally, here's one from Lee. You obviously still believe that there is such a thing as an innocent Palestinian. So you have all of that going on. There will always be people who are not prepared to admit in any conceivable way that the people being killed in Gaza are innocent. And that, of course, is the rationale under which genocides can happen. But what the British government can do is a question that needs to be properly addressed, because you've got two stools here. You've got people like our friends Richard and Lee there, who are essentially either sitting on their hands or cheering possible genocide. And then you've got, at the other extreme, people like the ones accusing Jonathan Ashworth of somehow having Palestinian blood on his hands, when there was literally nothing substantive or meaningful that these people could have done to stay Netanyahu's hand. So you take those two ludicrous extremes, you acknowledge importantly that it is their vitriol and their bigotry that actually closes down the conversation. You ask yourself, do they want the conversation to be closed down, or do they not realise that their vitriol and bigotry is closing down the conversation? And we will have different answers, I suspect, to that question. But you have to recognise that lives are saved according to dialogue. And if we are not having these conversations, we are not having these dialogues, then we are, I guess, implicitly waving through a continuation of the carnage. Now, some people want that, like our friends Richard and Lee. They want more dead Palestinian people. They want more dead brown children. But for those of us who don't, what is Keir Starmer supposed to do now? 0345 6060 973. I'll push you a little bit. I'll try my very best not to be brusque or short-tempered on this, but it does take a toll being accused of things like that. Obviously it does. But it has to be something meaningful. It has to, I think, now that he's in power, because this was what was used to defend him when he was in opposition. He can't do anything because he's not in power. So it has to be something meaningful. It has to be something substantive. It has to be something that is likely to change the game. And I'm going to tell you at 10:18 what my cautious opinion is at this point. Cautious opinion. and it's pessimistic and it's heartbreaking. But in the context of somehow stopping Netanyahu from continuing to kill Palestinian people, I don't think there's anything that Keir Starmer can do. And if that's true, I wonder how helpful it would be for him to admit that. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. What should the UK government policy be? You've got to get used to this. It's not Labour Party. It's not opinions expressed in opposition or votes cast because of parliamentary arithmetic and the SNP. All of that's in the past. This is Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He's called explicitly for a ceasefire. He has committed himself publicly to a two-state solution. And yet he has got a slightly denuded cabinet at the moment as a direct consequence. His culture secretary and I forget what Jonathan Ashworth's brief was. They are not in his cabinet because there are people in British constituencies who succeeded in peddling the propaganda, I think, to be kind, that they somehow bear personal responsibility for the continuing carnage in Gaza. That's how I see it. I could be wrong. I sometimes am. All right. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What do you want your government's policy to be? All right. And remember, this is not necessarily a question that demands contributions informed by the continuing carnage. Perhaps you want the carnage to continue. You think there is no choice but for Israel to continue to kill innocent women and children, to drop missiles on schools and hospitals and the rest of it, because either you've swallowed the idea that they're all secretly full of terrorists, and the reason why Israel won't let independent journalists in to actually find out for themselves is perfectly reasonable and plausible. That position is one that I'd like to be explored, but probably not in snarky texts from WhatsApp accounts. I'd quite like it to be done in the daylight. It's 20 after 10.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10 is the time. So just to clarify, I'm suggesting he may have already done everything that he can do in power, which is a hell of a lot more than he could do in opposition. So something that I forgot to mention is that the expectation that the Labour government will drop the previous government's bid to delay the International Criminal Court reaching a decision on whether to issue an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu over alleged war crimes in Gaza. So speaking to Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, expressing his belief that Palestinians have an undeniable right to a Palestinian state, decrying the ongoing suffering and devastating loss of life, speaking to Netanyahu and setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire in Gaza, adding that it's important to ensure the long-term conditions for a two-state solution were in place, including ensuring that the Palestinian Authority had the financial means to operate effectively. And finally, and to reiterate that expectation, I think endorsed by David Lammy, that the Labour government will drop its predecessor's attempts to delay the International Criminal Court's decision on whether to issue an arrest warrant for the Israeli Prime Minister. So what else should he do? 0345 6060 973. I don't know how interesting you find it for me to highlight to you how toxic this conversation is off air. It can become pretty toxic on air, but here's an example. So you've listened to the same 20 minutes as radio as whoever sent this, and someone has listened to that and written 20 minutes without a single mention of Hamas or the hostages. That speaks volumes. Well, I mean, it's just not true. The very first thing that we mentioned was a report in Israel overnight that Netanyahu had himself torpedoed hostage negotiations. The first thing that we said in the context of the continuing carnage in Gaza was that it was impossible to argue after the October the 7th terror attack that Israel should do nothing. I genuinely don't know how you can listen to that and think that you've heard something completely different. But on we go. Maria is in Barnet. Maria, what would you like to say?
Hi, I just want to say I think that we need to understand the limitations of what any government, Labour or otherwise, can do. And I actually think since he's been in power for a few days, the Labour government's message has actually been very encouraging and very calm. We need a measured approach. We can't expect British foreign policy to influence the Middle East. I don't know what on earth people think.
Well, it did do for a very long time, but
it did, James, because they ruled the Middle East.
Yes, and those days are over.
They had the mandate. They did what they did.
Yes, exactly.
But now, it's not relevant. It's comical, but it needs to be heard. And I think you speak very rightly about the toxicity, because there are two different things. You've got international opinion, and Britain has a role in influencing perhaps America and other countries about how to approach things in the Middle East. But in the UK itself, there's also a need to try and take a measured, calm approach, which is very difficult among British people.
Are we being a bit post-colonial when we say that? Are we taking a measured, calm approach to Ukraine? Would we take a measured, calm approach if there were missiles dropping on schools in Birmingham?
Of course not, but the whole point is this. Ukraine is a whole different area. The Middle East affects people here.
But the lives are
equal,
aren't they?
Every human life is equal.
So why would you be measured to one carnage and not to another?
It's not about what actually is, it's about what's perceived. What's happening in the Ukraine, for many people, seems almost a black and white situation. You have Russia, you have Putin.
But what's happening in Gaza is black and white now, isn't it? It wasn't for a long time. It certainly wasn't in October of last year. But now 2 million people being dislocated because of the alleged pursuit, the supposed pursuit of 20,000 possible terrorists. I can't think of a historical precedent for that.
It's simple that Netanyahu gave Hamas exactly what they wanted. Hamas wanted to provide
that's black and white.
And he walked. That's black and white. But in terms of here in the UK, the divisions on a social level, on community level, are very, very dangerous.
That's true, and very different from the other examples I cited.
Yes,
very
and
different.
That's why I beg to differ in terms of what you're saying. Every human life. I'm not discussing that. What I mean is what you raise, which I think is very, very relevant, is that it affects life here in the UK. It affects communities. It affects the ability to talk and discuss what we have heard about these constituencies where there's been allegations of bullying and intimidation.
That's a really important point. So Starmer cannot approach it as if he's just hatched and he can take an objective moral position on any of this. He has to be cognizant of the domestic political situation, but he could still go considerably further than he has done in the condemnation of the continuing killings in Gaza. You're suggesting that he can't do that because of upset he may cause at home?
Not at all. Not at all.
What then?
Well, what I'm saying.
So why can't he? Why can't Keir Starmer say this is ethnic cleansing? And it's disgusting.
Because I don't think it's in the interest of Keir Starmer to say it's ethnic cleansing and disgusting, and I don't think it's in the interest of actually having a dialogue and negotiation to talk like that. I think what is in the
likelihood of a negotiation with Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, has disappeared a while ago, didn't it?
I think.
Yes, it did. That's just a matter of fact.
But Netanyahu is one man. He is not the Israeli people. He's in charge now of a coalition.
In this conversation, in this war, he is both. I'm afraid he is the finger on the trigger, as it were, metaphorically speaking, and he might well be hidebound by fascists in his own cabinet, about which the British media is far too quiet. Convicted terrorist in his own cabinet, and can you imagine any other government in the world that contains genocidal maniacs and convicted terrorists that you would suggest a British Prime Minister has to approach with decorum and caution?
Yes, I think historically there's always had that. We've had that when we've tried to reach a peace with Ireland. We've had that with many countries. I think you have to be really pragmatic, and by encouraging extremism on either side, the crazy...
Okay. Right, you may be right. You may be right, and I'm grateful for your perspective. I really am, because it is in complete and stark relief with the people who look at some of the footage coming out of the Gaza Strip now and feel an existential howl gathering in their heart, just as people witnessed the events of October the 7th in Israel and felt their hearts shatter into a million pieces. But for this country, looking at this death toll, I understand why an awful lot of people would reject the idea that Keir Starmer should be diplomatic and cautious, but that doesn't mean that Maria is wrong. It just makes her pill a difficult pill to swallow. The time is 10:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:34. So the camouflage of opposition has been removed. Keir Starmer and his supporters can no longer argue, as I did, that calling upon him to do more in the context of Gaza is a little self-indulgent, because nothing the leader of the opposition in the United Kingdom can say is going to have any influence at all upon Benjamin Netanyahu. And now he is Prime Minister, and so that has changed. And it may not have changed in the context of changing Netanyahu's behaviour, but it changes in the context of the UK's position on these issues. That's the point. 10:34 is the time. So how does he go further than he has gone already in calling explicitly for a ceasefire, in committing publicly to a two-state solution, to reportedly being poised to remove attempts to delay the ICC's decision on whether or not an arrest warrant should be issued for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. 10:35 is the time, and we'll be speaking to an Israeli journalist shortly about those reports overnight that Netanyahu himself has been accused by the hostage negotiation team in Israel of torpedoing attempts to get hostages released. Bernard is in Bristol. Bernard, what would you like to say?
Okay, thanks for taking my call,
Very welcome.
James. My fundamental point is that this whole issue is playing what I would call an outsized proportion of influence in our domestic politics. Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister of the UK, as was Sunak before him. We just went through an election.
Yeah, listen, Bernard, before you continue, I just need to explain to you the parameters of this radio show. The question we're asking is what Keir Starmer should do about Gaza. So Gaza's not very important is not an answer to that question.
Okay. So he's done, I think, as much as he could do or should do.
Okay, and to the people pointing out that the death toll is now approaching 40,000 and there's no immediate sign of it stopping, we say what?
I say there are many conflicts all around the world where the death toll is even worse. Have you heard about the conflict in Sudan?
Are they an ally of the United Kingdom?
Actually, I can tell you this.
No, you can just say yes or no first.
Sorry.
Are they a major ally of the United Kingdom?
No, they're not.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, there is the key difference in the simplest of terms. Also, forgive me, but it sounded like you were eating while you were talking to me, which is something I find absolutely unbearable. Peter is in New Malden. Peter, what would you like to say?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for keeping this the focus on this issue, because I think it's hugely important. You say 40,000 people, women and children being killed. And I think there does need to be a change in British policy. I think the first and simple thing that Keir Starmer could do is announce the refunding of UNRWA, because UNRWA plays a massive role in supporting refugees, both in Gaza, in Jordan, in neighbouring countries. And I think removing it because some members of UNRWA were alleged to have been part of Hamas. Okay, there was an investigation. We've never seen any Israeli investigations actually produce anything public. So I think announcing support for UNRWA would be a good step. And then I think announcing or considering the recognition of a Palestinian state. You know, he said that he will support a two-state solution. That is a nice statement. It's a slogan which we've heard for years. But I think announcing an intention to recognize a Palestinian state would nudge that debate forward in a way. It's not going to be accepted by Netanyahu or be condemned by many people in this country. But I think that is a tangible step which could be taken, which would demonstrate a change of British policy and pressure on Netanyahu to actually reach a deal to release the hostages, but to stop the carnage in Gaza.
I think there's something starting in Jordan this week, actually, an international conference in Jordan this week, looking at gathering political and financial support for UNRWA. So if Starmer was looking for an opportunity to do what you suggest, that perhaps might provide it. Of course, about 200 of their own staff in Gaza have been killed, and many of the facilities there have
UN staff and
come on. Well, they are UN staff, aren't they? Technically.
Yeah.
What is? I think you have a background in diplomacy, Peter. Is that right?
I was ambassador in Jordan.
Okay. Crikey. So, what is the difference for a layman between calling for a two-state solution and recognising a Palestinian state? Do you, for example, need to define exactly what the borders of that state would be in order to recognise it?
No, you don't need to define the borders. After all, the borders will be defined by a negotiation. That negotiation has took place in the 1990s. The last time it took place was about 2014 or 15 when I was in Jordan. And actually, Netanyahu pulled the plug on it. So I think it is more a point of pressure than a tangible step.
And that's the difference between government and opposition that I've been trying to articulate. Yeah. You've just done a much better job than I've managed to in 40 minutes. It's that you can apply pressure as a prime minister that you cannot apply as the leader of an opposition.
Yeah. Yeah, and it pushes other countries in Europe, and particularly in Washington. I mean, Starmer is in Washington today. He can talk to Biden. I mean, I think the Americans have the key leverage here, and I think that is a role which any British government should play, talking to our friends in a very practical and pragmatic way about what the Americans themselves can do to bring peace to this area after so many years of carnage and terrorism on both sides. And
that would differentiate us from the American position. It push us closer to some of our European allies.
Yes, it would, and
and that's what you're calling for.
That. Yes, because I think between friends we don't need to always pander to be the poodle to the American bulldog, but we can actually play an influential role behind the scenes. It doesn't need to be all in public, but behind the scenes. I think changing the position of the British government will be very important and will give a strong signal to Netanyahu that the game is over.
Do you think this is likely to happen?
I don't think it will, I'm afraid. And I don't think it will make a huge difference. But I think doing this in an incremental fashion. So start with UNRWA, declare our support for the International Criminal Court rather than condemning it. So I think moving in small steps to show support for international law. I spent my whole diplomatic career being taught that international law was at the heart of our foreign policy. Unfortunately, the last government undermined that. I'd like to see that restored.
I think we will see that restored. The question is when and how, isn't it, really? Yeah. I don't think we're going to see a repetition of the contempt with which it was treated and which a couple of the contenders for the Tory leadership probably still subscribe to. But I can't see Keir Starmer going down that road for fairly obvious reasons. Thank you, Peter. That's really helpful, and particularly, of course, given your past as a former ambassador, not just to Jordan, but also to Libya. At 10:42 is the time, and there it is. There are substantive things that could be done. Rob says this call is great. Get him on more often. Oh, it doesn't work like that, Rob. If he's kind enough to ring us, we can talk to him. But the point of this programme generally is that all opinions are equal, but some opinions are more equal than others. Ali's in Leicester. Ali, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello,
lovely
Ali.
to speak to you. I'm just looking. Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, Starmer has a wide range of options that he can take. And I think that to start off with, the idea that, the world's leading the soft power nation and the Prime Minister of the UK, the only thing he can do is go on a phone call with Netanyahu and say that he wants an immediate ceasefire. I think that's the only option he has is a bit daft. I think
no one did, and that's one of the options that he has, and that's the one that he's done. So how could he go further?
Well, yeah. So I think he's got a lot of baby steps and one big step that he can take. So with the baby steps, I think that first of all, he could withdraw the UK's intervention into the ICC in regards to
it has been reported that he is doing that.
Yeah, and then he could also publish the legal advice in regards to arms sales to Israel, which they've been calling the Tory government to do.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Which would be very welcome. He can, as your previous caller said, restore funding to UNRWA. He could also back South Africa and ICJ, which Spain and Ireland have done and have joined the proceedings with South Africa against Israel. They could prosecute British nationals who may have committed war crimes in Gaza or may even cite a genocide, just as we have, of course, people in the UK who've supported Hamas, a prescribed terrorist organisation. And the one big step...
Hang on, what was that? What was that last one?
I said that he could prosecute British nationals who have committed crimes in Gaza.
Right. But, it would have to be established independently that they were crimes, wouldn't it? We don't have jurisdiction in Gaza any more than we have jurisdiction in Israel. It would have to be an I think that last one. I just think it might be a bit legally confused, not intellectually. Right. Yeah. I thought the last government was preparing to release the details of. I thought they'd found the summary of its legal advice was that selling arms to Israel would not lead. There were no clear risks that it would lead to a serious breach of international humanitarian law. The problem is that it's so hard to keep up when you've got a general election smack in the middle of it. That was when Andrew Mitchell was Deputy Foreign Secretary. Did that never happen? That was never. Those findings were never actually published, or were they? I don't think either of us can fully remember. Can we?
They weren't published, but I do remember back in February when a Tory MP, I think she was the chair of a select committee or something. I can't remember exactly, but there was a leaked recording where she said that the UK, they were advised actually against arms to Israel, and it could be a breach of. Well,
that's one way to clear it up. Either someone reminds us that it has been done, or you return to calling for it to be done. That's not complicated at all, is it? Right. Yeah. What's the biggest thing you could do? What's the big step, not the baby step?
The big symbolic thing that he could do, which wouldn't materially change what's happening on the ground, but it'd be very, very symbolic, I think would be recognising the Palestinian state. And I think considering the UK's history and all of it, and that would be very, very big.
I think a word on why that's controversial, because some of it is out in the open, isn't it? And some of it is not. I wonder how many people listening to this, for example, know that the state of Palestine is recognised as a sovereign state by 145 of the 193 member states of the United Nations, or if you prefer, just over 75%, which, in terms of whether it's possible or plausible or doable, rather answers the question in pretty incontrovertible fashion. It clearly is. The state of Palestine has even been admitted into UNESCO in the G20. Argentina, Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa and Turkey, as well as the permanent invitee Spain, all recognise Palestine as a state. And I suppose what I'd say to you is that they've already done it. 145 of 193 member states of the UN have done this. What difference would it make if we did?
I mean, like I said, I don't think it would materially change the conflict, the ongoing conflict right now, what would happen on the ground. But I think considering the UK's history, its colonial history, and the ones that established the Israeli state and what led up to it and everything, I think that would be very symbolic of the moving world.
And it's hard to escape the suspicion sometimes that when you are calling for a two-state solution while not recognising the state of Palestine, you are being conscious of the people who either don't actually want a state of Palestine or who argue that it is absolutely impossible to achieve in any sort of realistic way. And those two positions are pretty hard to distinguish from each other, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also kind of reflects, well, a lot of what people on social media have been saying, which is how the response between when Russia commits kind of crimes or bombs hospitals, and then when we see the same happening in Gaza. Yeah,
it's not comparing apples with apples, I don't think, not least because, as Jamie reminds me, Israel is a democracy. The way to get rid of Netanyahu is for the Israeli people to vote to get rid of him. That's not an option that the Russian people have. But if you look at it from the other end of the telescope, a missile landing on a school or on a hospital should probably provoke an almost identical moral, ethical and political response. Until we return to Maria, the first caller this hour, who reminded us that the domestic considerations, which is That's an incredibly helpful but vague phrase. That it reminds me actually of the language of the Good Friday Agreement. Domestic considerations will be different in condemning Israel from what they would be in condemning Russia. I don't think we can run away from that, even if we don't like it. They will be different. The domestic ramifications, the political ramifications will be different. And of course, as we've seen with Jonathan Ashworth's experiences and Thangam Debonair's experiences, it is a position and a problem that resonates far beyond social media. Up next, we'll talk to Noga Tarnapolsky, a freelance journalist in Jerusalem, about these reports. And I'll say these words slowly because they're breathtaking. Reports that Benjamin Netanyahu systematically foiled talks to release hostages from Hamas captivity. It's 10:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:51. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You mention Israel far more often than you mention the hostages or the terror attack. This is proof of your anti-Semitism. Text 1, text 2, which came in at exactly the same time. I've been so annoyed with you over your constant over-referencing of October the 7th that it seems I've missed an interesting first hour. That's from Adam in Manchester. So I'm not complaining necessarily. I'm just highlighting that however we conduct these conversations, I can't win. But what I can do is develop an ability to be answerable only to myself. And I'll take your guidance and I'll take your counsel on that. But if you're going to accuse me of anti-Semitism on the one hand or having the blood of Palestinian children on my hands on the other, I have no choice but to trust in my own convictions and my own instincts. 10:52 is the time. We cross now to Jerusalem, where Noga Tarnapolsky comes to our aid on these issues, not for the first time. And we'll zone in immediately, if we may, Noga, on these remarkable reports that Benjamin Netanyahu systematically foiled talks aimed to release Israeli hostages from Hamas captivity. What do we know?
Right. Hello, James.
Hello.
Well, actually, two simply gobsmacking, astonishing reports, basically in the last 12 hours. The first one is the one that you mentioned, and what it says is it just outlines in this chilling list every time that there was an opportunity to advance talks that would release the Israeli hostages, more than 120, still stuck in Gaza, alive or dead, and the manner in which the Prime Minister himself, sometimes illegally using classified information to which only he had access, or he and the leader of the opposition, the way he went about manipulating public opinion. I'll give you one example from this report. We're talking about a report in the newspaper Haaretz, by the way. So one report is that, for example, in one of the first sets of talks that took place after the only release plan that has ever come into being in November, about 250 some odd hostages were taken by Hamas on October 7th. And in late November, a week-long truce was put into place in which over 100 were released alive. And the next opportunity for talks was in December, and the idea of the United States certainly was to basically try and recreate the moment and release the remaining, however many there were at the time, 140 or so. And it describes Netanyahu using information that he had from the Israeli negotiators about which were the Palestinian prisoners Hamas was demanding would be freed. So some murderers, convicted murderers, some people, and he using that information with very clever and nefarious manipulation to terrify the Israeli public, putting it out via media proxies of his own, information no one had access to. And it also was not true, because these are simply Hamas requests on the table. This was not a final agreement. But using this to whip up public sentiment against any deal, and also, maybe even worse, to hamper the work of his own negotiating team at that time in Paris, who were trying to move ahead and couldn't because of the political frenzy that had been whipped up in Israel. That's just one example. And this article, it outlines every single time there was a chance to advance towards a deal, how Netanyahu acted basically to keep treading water. And this is because he believes that if a deal is signed, that he will lose key members of his coalition and his government will fall.
And the detail that you describe speaks to the likely source, or is the source specified in the journalism of where this information is coming from?
It's really just kind of an earth-shattering article by Michael Hauser-Tov of Haaretz. It's very precise. It's not an assumption of Netanyahu. He has, in particular, military sources and diplomatic sources, those involved in the negotiations, detailing how the prime minister made them stumble every time. I have to tell you, James, this goes hand in hand with another report by another excellent Israeli journalist, Nadav Eyal. It came out yesterday in Israel's #1 top daily tabloid, Yediot Achronot. And here it is revealed that senior people in Netanyahu's orbit, in other words, not his private appointees, but career people. The one mentioned by name is former military attaché General Avi Gil, who just left his position about 2 months ago, I believe, that he and others reported to the Attorney General, who's Israel's top law enforcement officer, the concern and even direct reports that the office of the Prime Minister, in other words, his small office, his personal staff, had been tampering with the protocols of the war cabinet meetings and altering the transcripts of the top security phone calls that the Prime Minister had been having. Obviously, everything I'm outlining to you, if eventually proved, is completely illegal.
Yeah. What happens next?
Well...
Nice easy question for you, Noga.
No, but you were mentioning, I heard you speaking before the break, and you said, well, Netanyahu's legally elected, and the way that Israelis can get rid of him is to vote him out. And you're right. And yet Israelis today confront a situation which we've seen elsewhere before, in which a legally elected leader is using nefarious tactics to try and crush the system, the very system that elected him, to his own needs. Here we see a prime minister who's already under criminal indictment. He's on trial as we speak. In fact, he's scheduled to provide testimony in his own defense as of December the 2nd. As crazy as that may sound. And we see him literally doing everything, risking the lives of hostages who were taken away from their homes because they were already betrayed by the state. The state should have protected them, should have been able to protect them. So these are, I don't even know how to describe them. No, triply, quadruply betrayed citizens.
And all for self-interest, all for self-protection, defined and distilled, as you've just described, by the need to keep on side some distinctly unsavoury characters, including, of course, a convicted terrorist and people whose political background speaks to not just anti-Arab, but dedicated to the occupation of currently Palestinian-held territory. To that point, finally, Noga, because I rely upon you for introductions to these characters. Tell us a little, if you would, about and forgive my pronunciation perhaps, about Amichai Chikli.
Oh, goodness. Really?
Because because I think an awful lot of British listeners, including people who have an emotional and familial investment in Israel, are not clear about what Netanyahu's government is actually like. They object to some. So this chap is the diaspora minister.
Right. So... he's an interesting case, James, because you mentioned before the minister in charge of police, who's a convicted hate crimer.
Yeah.
I could go down more. There's Aryeh Deri, a man convicted twice of crimes of corruption, a guy who has no right to be a minister, and I could go on and on. Amichai Shikli is an interesting case of someone who's never been convicted of anything, but also who's never really done much. The only reason he is in this government is because Netanyahu poached him away from another party by promising him a ministry to get this guy's support in parliament, where, you know, in Israel, as in the UK, you need to have a majority to survive, parliamentary majority. And he is a vulgarian, I'd say. His favorite gesture appears to be to give people the finger. And you can see on my Twitter feed, for example, an image of him from last year's New York Rally for Israel parade or something like that. The way he greeted journalists was with two middle fingers stuck up by his face. He's a friend of neo-Nazis. He overtly supported Marine Le Pen in the recent French elections.
Let me pause you there, because Le Pen's party, of course, has its roots in the collaborationist Vichy regime, and until relatively recently was still taking remnants of the collaborating government into its ranks. So, for a lot of, I think, a lot of Brits and a lot of French people, it will be extraordinary to imagine a Jewish Israeli minister being not just comfortable with, but enthusiastic for that sort of politics.
Well, you know, there's a small but loud cadre in the Israeli political scene that is basically led by the son of the current prime minister.
Right.
In other words, Yair Netanyahu, who is a bit of his father's muse, who runs the most toxic social media networks on behalf of his dad. He's the one who began befriending the Viktor Orbáns of the world. Other European leaders who can be compared to what you just said, basically the remnants of neo-Nazi Europe. And Amichai Shikli is among them.
It is always a curious mixture of interesting and dispiriting to listen to your analysis of Israel, live as always from Jerusalem. Noga, thank you. If you don't follow Noga on Twitter, then you are choosing the darkness over the light when it comes to having a full, or at least a greater understanding of what is going on. And crucially, some of the key personnel that Netanyahu's necessity to keep sweet explains things like, you could go as far as to say the continuing carnage, but the reports today, the deliberate attempts to scupper hostage negotiations while using the detention of hostages publicly as the rationale for continuing the killing. 3 minutes after 11, you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 7 minutes after 11, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've got an interesting story Aggie Chamber has got for your delectation a little later this hour about something I consider to be one of the crucial points of difference between the new government and the old government. I think in many ways, in terms of what we call soft power domestically, or what we might call soft power domestically, it's arguably one of the most important distinctions, and it's the response that the party will take, the response that the leader will take in the event of misbehaviour in his own ranks. Where would you even begin? Who was the last Tory politician to be sacked the last member of government to be sacked for actually misbehaving? It was Braverman and Patel, wasn't it? So Patel got the flick from Theresa May for flying to Israel, funnily enough, given the conversation we were having in the last hour, without telling her. So for having secret meetings with the foreign government, and given what Noga was just telling us about some members of that government, that offence begins to look even more obscene, doesn't it, in the modern day and today. And then Braverman got sacked for, well, it was never specified, was it? Truss sacked her, and then Sunak sacked. So who were the last two British politicians to be sacked for being awful? Suella Braverman and Suella Braverman, sacked as Home Secretary. But they weren't sacked for, if you like, operational errors. They were sacked for essentially going on manoeuvres. She was sacked for writing an article attacking the police. I told you, didn't I, that we were going to start saying things out loud, and then we were going to go, no, that can't have happened. But it happened, and it happened relatively recently. It happened in November of last year. Not even 12 months ago, a Home Secretary got fired after writing an article attacking the police, of whom she is nominally in charge. This was all part of her attempts to portray people protesting in support of the Palestinian people as being hate marchers. So anyway, the point is that I'm fascinated by what Starmer will do if, stroke when, one of his lot puts a foot out of line, either personally or professionally, either morally or politically. Legally, I think it'll be relatively straightforward. Certainly if they were... Well, anyway, I'm spoiling Aggie's story. We'll find out. She's got some insights into what the new look government will... what position it will approach on this. So that's coming up. I've got an absolutely magnificent tease for you. It's a missing word headline. What do you think the missing word is in this headline? Man caught with 104 blanks in his trousers. Man caught with 104 blanks in his trousers. Do you know what it is? I know, obviously I know. Don't cheat. Let's have some guesses and see if some of the guesses are funny. Man caught with 104 what's in his trousers. It's my favourite headline of the day. The story about Joe Biden is one of those stories that I approach very tentatively. I don't want to talk about it because I don't like what we discover when we do. George Clooney is not a typical actor. By that I mean he's not one of those actors whose opinions could do with a little bit more thought and hard work. I'm a big fan of Lovies. I think it's very important that they intervene into the public space. I also think that given the contributions to public discourse by professional politicians over the last few years, off the top of my head, I think probably Nadine Dorries and Jacob Rees-Mogg would be the best examples. The idea that actors are somehow less qualified or less informed than professional politicians is palpably absurd. Same with football commentators as it goes. But when George Clooney intervenes, it's a little bit different, not least because he's raised tens of millions of dollars for the Democrats in general and for Joe Biden in particular. His father, I think it was Nick, although I don't know quite where I've plucked that name from. I think his dad was called Nick Clooney, was a very respected anchorman and TV journalist, a brilliant broadcaster by all accounts. And so Clooney grew up in a journalist's house. And I'm not suggesting that gives him superpowers or anything like that, but it means he will know exactly what he is doing when he writes an opinion article for the New York Times expressing his deep affection for the US president, but drawing upon recent personal interaction when calling for Joe Biden to quit the race. It's devastating to see. I think this is one of the best things I've read in the context of political commentary, because it's exactly what I mean when I say I don't want to talk about it. He writes, "It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Was he tired? Yes. A cold? Maybe. But our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we just saw." And then the absolute kicker. We are not going to win with this president. You've completely overrun my inbox now with suggestions as to what the missing word might have been in that headline, so much so that I'm not sure I can even begin to scratch the surface of it. I'll try. It wasn't Brexiteers, Steve, and it wasn't life-size models of Rishi Sunak, Rich, who's in Bristol. I'm told Toby Tarrant has already covered this story on Radio X, but I'm banking on the fact that most people won't have caught that because they would have been too busy listening to me. So it is to Joe Biden that we turn our attention next. And it is proof, isn't it, of the pudding we shared together last week. I asked you the question about whether or not, knowing what you know about people of a certain maturity, watching what could only be attributed to age-related decline, so specifically not dementia, not a diagnosable condition even, but because you've got someone in your life that you love. And indeed, I think we took a couple of calls from people who put themselves in this category. You know that what you are seeing is not a temporary aberration. You know that it is part of a escalating or accelerating pattern. And although we derived a little bit of optimism at the end of the conversation by playing a clip from a rally that he attended the following day when he sounded full of pep, what George Clooney has done is essentially zone in on the fact that that will not and cannot be the only time that Joe Biden's cognitive functioning will appear to be stuttering. It's an unfortunate choice of words given that he actually has a stammer, but you understand what I mean. So what I don't get, and what I want you to tell me, is how it even matters in the context of Donald Trump's depravity. So you have a convicted felon, an adjudicated rapist, a Vladimir Putin apologist. You have somebody whose sins are so legion that, I mean, I was thinking of him actually when Noga was talking about Benjamin Netanyahu a moment ago, and I think she was as well when she referred to elected leaders subverting the very democracy that had elected them. So you can list Donald Trump's demeanours, for want of a better word, and you probably reach 100 before you even get to the abomination that was January the 6th. And yet you still have the very real prospect that Joe Biden being doddery could be the defining factor in an election that would deliver this man-child, Donald Trump, back to the White House. And that's the bit I don't get, and I wonder whether you might have a crack at explaining it to me. So it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. It makes sense and it doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Because, you know, I would rather have a tin of rice pudding as my Prime Minister than Donald Trump. And I almost mean that literally. You know, with a decent team around it and a strong cabinet and some decent appointments, a tin of rice pudding would be a perfectly safe pair of hands in the context of how most liberal democracies function. I would rather have a tin of rice pudding. Anyone else just suddenly thought, do you know what, I haven't had any rice pudding for ages. I like a rice. Do you ever make your own rice? I love rice pudding. Oh, when you make it yourself, it gets a skin on top and everything. It's delicious. Delicious. I digress slightly. I would rather have a tin of rice pudding as my Prime Minister than Donald Trump, or Boris Johnson for that matter, but that's a conversation for another day. So how can... Explain to me how Joe Biden's... What's the best word to use here? Dodderiness is quite a good word. It wasn't 104 tins of rice pudding in the man's trousers, no. Good guess, though, because that might have been a bit of auto-suggestion going on there. He wouldn't be able to walk with 104. No, I mean, what if they were stacked on top of each other? He'd be 30 feet tall. Anyway, how can Joe Biden's dodderiness be a defining factor in an American election when the opposition is a criminal sex offender? 0345 6060 973. That's what I want to know. In a way, it's the old question about how can anybody vote for Donald Trump when he's so obviously disgusting. But we don't get to use the Atlantic as a safety blanket here because we've just put someone in the House of Commons who's essentially a cheerleader in chief for Donald Trump, both in this country and over there. So you know that Nigel Farage doesn't care about Donald Trump being a convicted felon or a self-confessed sex offender or an adjudicated rapist or an enemy, a proven enemy of American democracy, up to and including inciting a mob to attack his own vice president. The list is extraordinary. It sustains only in a world where alternative facts have been offered up as a choice. I'll never forget that moment when Kellyanne Conway used the phrase alternative facts to describe lies. Understand that, and you understand much of what's happened on both sides of the Atlantic, across the stable West in recent years, where Vladimir Putin and useful idiots have managed to, if you like, conflate facts with falsehoods by claiming that they sort of balance each other out. It's kind of what Elon Musk is doing to Twitter at the moment. But I keep digressing, and I keep saying I digress. What I should do is stop saying I digress, because I'm no longer digressing. You know more about American politics than I do, quite possibly, or you know more about psychology or electoral shenanigans than I do. So why is Joe Biden's dodderiness so definitive when his opponent is so disgusting? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. That's the question. Why is Joe Biden's dodderiness so significant when his opponent in the imminent presidential election is so objectively disgusting? That's the bit I don't get. I don't get how you could be wavering. So here is a disgusting man, and you're comfortable with him being disgusting, okay? In fact, you like it. You love it. It's fantastic. Partly, I think, sometimes because some people wish they could behave like that, but also partly because that's how fascism works. The leader of a fascist movement is exempted from the laws that everybody else has to obey, and even from the network of obligations that binds the rest of us together. But the bit I don't get is how anybody could be looking at the American presidential election and thinking to them, it'd be like if someone had stood against Hitler with a decent chance of winning, and there would have been a significant swathe of the German population going, oh, I'm definitely not voting for Hitler, and then the other guy sort of falls over or eats a bacon sandwich badly, and you go, oh, no, actually, I am going to vote for Hitler. So Trump is so objectively and so obviously awful. How on earth can the dodderiness of Joe Biden be pushing undecideds into the arms of the self-confessed sex offender? That's the question I want you to answer. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 20 past 11.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 22 minutes after 11, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's an important question. If I was a betting man, which I am actually, if I was a betting man, I would be looking at the odds now on Biden pulling out. I just think you've got an actual senator calling for him to stop. You've got George Clooney writing a massive op-ed in the New York Times, and the sense of momentum is unlikely to diminish, is it? That's the thing about momentum; it normally increases. So I think that the worries about his dodderiness are likely to nix his candidacy, but when you remember who he's up against, how could anybody be wavering between the two to the point where they waver in that direction, in Trump's direction, because Joe Biden has some senior moments? 0345, well, you know the number. Az is in Forest Hill. Az, what would you like to say?
James, good morning.
Hello.
I was saying to your producer, I have many African-American, Black American friends who are lawyers currently. Have teachers who teach U.S. law. Dr. Greg Carr, friends with Dr. Gerald Horne, as I mentioned to you before.
Yes.
Dr. Gerald Horne is also a lawyer and a historian. In this context, James, my friends would vote for Joe Biden even if he was dead, to prevent Donald Trump.
This is precisely the point of this topic.
Yeah, to prevent Donald Trump doing what Benjamin Netanyahu, as your previous Israeli journalist told you, is going to do in the American federal government.
Is alleged to have done already, not just... they're two slightly different propositions, and you lead us inexorably, I think, to something I'm not yet an expert on, but this is Project 2025. Jinx, padlock 1, 2, 3.
Right. So he's going to dismantle the federal apparatus of the United States of America. You've seen the Dobbs decision over his Wade overturned. You've seen DEI overturned partially, because no DEI has been applied to the military. So all of these things, James, you wouldn't be hard-pressed to see him overturn executive orders that go all the way back.
It's been published. It includes a lengthy manifesto. It's got a list of dream hires. It would upend, as you say, the way the federal government operates, just to get a sort of flavour of what it contains. The president of the Heritage Foundation, the organisation behind it, said, "We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be." Trump has attended. Mate, I don't know if I have your full attention. It sounds like you're, I don't know, riding a unicycle up and down Forest Hill High Street.
No, I'm still here.
All right, well, it's not a great phone line, but you're not here to answer the question of how anyone could be persuadable towards Trump by the dodderiness of Joe Biden, because you're as baffled by it as I am.
I'm not baffled.
Go on, then.
I'm not baffled. No, if they remove Joe Biden as the president, as the candidate, beg your pardon,
yes.
that means they're also going to remove Kamala Harris.
No, it doesn't.
She cannot run on a ticket that doesn't have Joe Biden.
No, she categorically can. She's the only person that can, as I understand it.
And the Democratic Party are actively trying to remove her because it's not 2024.
Are you sure? I don't think they are. As I understand it, they won't be able to use any of the money that has been raised on a Biden-Harris ticket if neither of them are on it. So
in 2028, James, they don't want
all right,
to run.
I'd like to explore this further, but the fine line isn't good enough. And I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong, but I certainly heard I think she was called Lindy Lee, a very impressive interviewee. And a major fundraiser and friend of Biden's. I'm pretty sure she explained that and she sort of signs the metaphorical checks, that Harris would be the only candidate that could step in if they wanted to retain the enormous sums of money that have been raised for that campaign. It doesn't mean that that they couldn't choose not to sort of start fundraising again, but I think the contractual complications there were pretty epic. I'm pretty clear about what the alternative involves. The 2025 project is something that we all should be swatting up on, or Project 2025. It is Trump has attempted to distance himself from it, but that has been unsuccessful given all of the similarities and ties between the policy ideas and the former president's platform. It's pretty hideous. It's pretty grim. It's like a sort of cross between Gilead and Putin's Russia in a way. But how can anybody, and most voters won't be aware of that, but given what they are aware of, how could Joe Biden's dodderiness change anybody's mind? Joseph is in Stroud. Joseph, what would you like to say?
Right. So the real worry is, and this is what Trump is going to rely on in this election, is the voters that we, the rest of the world, need to go out and vote for the Democrats stay at home. So the Trump voters are going to go out and they're going to vote for Donald Trump, even if he walks out on stage butt naked, babbling inane stuff, defecates in his hands and starts clapping. Like, they're going to vote for him no matter what.
Well, there's an image.
Exactly. And it could happen. And they will still vote for him.
Well, this is the Fifth Avenue principle, isn't it?
This is the Fifth Avenue
shoot
thing.
Someone on Fifth Avenue.
This is it. The concern is now that the Democratic voters aren't going to turn up to vote.
Okay. So it's not that they're sitting there going, oh, eeny, meeny, miny, mo,
no,
sex offender or Sleepy Joe. They're going, that's not what's happening.
No. No. You're presuming, because you have to understand the level of political disengagement that the Americans have.
Right.
They have the luxury, just because of the size and the vastness and the wealth that country has. They have the amazing ability to be so politically disengaged. I mean, a huge percentage of the population doesn't even have a passport.
How disengaged are the Trump supporters in the traditional meaning of the word?
Absolutely disengaged. They don't care. They're going to vote for Trump no matter what.
So they're disengaged and committed at the same time, in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how many of them would be aware of Project 2025?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And they would applaud it anyway, because Trump said it.
That is cult. I mean, there is no other way to really get your head around that, except as imagining him as the kind of person that encourages people to take their own lives because the world is going to end at midnight on Tuesday, and then miraculously he's the only one still alive on Wednesday morning.
It doesn't matter to them.
Yeah. Crikey. How worried are you then?
I wasn't worried until I heard the clips of Joe.
Until the debate. So you're the you are the George Clooney of Stroud, really, Joseph.
That's it.
Yeah.
In
so many ways.
I looked. I wish I had the looks. I looked at it and I thought, there's no way that Trump can do this because he hasn't put together a coalition. The coalition that he's put together is far too small for him to be able to win this election. And then I saw Joe, and I was like, that's it. The Democratic voters are not going to turn up. They are not going to show up. They're just not going to turn up. They're going to stay at home in the places where they need to turn up to vote. They're not going to turn up to vote. It's going to come down to 5 states. It's going to come down to like maybe 250,000 voters, if that. I mean, you could put them. This election is going to hinge on a population which you could probably fit in Wimbledon.
As in the key votes in the swing states being such a tiny caucus. And then, of course, we move on to the other phone-in, which I chose not to have today. But while you're here, how does it happen? Because no one except Joe Biden is going to make this decision. And certainly what I don't think either front runner can do, whether Gavin Newsom has a proper chance or not, but neither him nor Kamala Harris can publicly call for it to happen, because that would hold their own. So how does it happen then?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Does
George Clooney know?
Pulling him aside.
Does George Clooney know? Will that make a difference, do you think?
I don't know.
We've lost George. We've lost George, Joe. 11:31, Joseph, thank you. I think sometimes the most powerful words in the English language are "I don't know." And certainly in recent years, on both sides of the Atlantic, if a few more people had been prepared to say them out loud, we'd probably be in a slightly better place. But by goodness me, I wish they didn't apply in this one. I really do. It's 11:31. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Snakes. It's snakes. He had 104 snakes in his trousers. I'm having one of those little moments again where I'm imagining how you are responding to this if you've just turned on the radio. You come back from the news, some hard-hitting political commentary. Israel in the last hour, Joe Biden this hour. What's he talking about 104 snakes in your trousers? It's my favourite headline of the day. A feature that I can't do every day. 52% because I always forget, and 48% because there won't be headlines as good as this every day. Man caught with 104 snakes in his trousers. I'll read you the first paragraph. A man has been caught trying to smuggle more than 100 live snakes into mainland China by cramming them into his trousers, according to the country's customs authority. Little reminder there of the importance of controlling your borders. Back to Joe Biden. And some of you are unhappy with my vocabulary. I don't know. Some of you are saying don't say dodderiness because it's unhelpful. Just say age-related fallibility, and other people complaining that dodderiness is underestimating the condition. Age-related decline, then. So we go for that, because we're not talking about a diagnosed condition, because as far as anybody knows, there isn't one. What George Clooney describes in this extraordinary article for the New York Times is personal experience of seeing in private what the world saw on that stage in that debate. What Josephine Stroud introduces to the question is a slight finesse, a slight evolution of the question, because it's not necessarily about, or not mostly about, the theoretical voter who is trying to pick between the two. Will it be Biden? Will it be Trump? I did make that rhyme up on the spot, actually, Richard. Thank you for your compliments. It's nice to feel appreciated. Goodness knows it doesn't happen very often. But yes, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, sex offender or Sleepy Joe. So that voter is probably not a significant contributor to the looming result in November. The one we need to be thinking about more is the voter who is aware of Trump's awfulness, but not sufficiently motivated to go out and vote for Joe Biden. How can that person exist? Helen's in Marlow. Helen, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
I would call those senior moments that are joining up to become more and more senior moments.
Yes.
And I think we all know that's going to happen if he became president.
That's the point, isn't it? That is the point. This is not going to go into reverse or even plateau.
No. So my proposal is you have, at the moment, a Biden-Harris ticket. You flip it and you make it a Harris-Biden ticket. What you gain then is vitality of a younger person taking those decisions, capable of doing all the things you need to do, with the experience and seniority of Biden in the background as the VP. And that way, I think that it would keep the ticket, which is a Biden-Harris ticket, just have it as a Harris-Biden ticket. It would give him, because it's difficult for somebody, pride and all the rest of it, to step down. But the alternative will be, if voices grow, that you'll have to go anyway. This way he could still be very much involved, still have a place at the table, but give him time to have a nap in the afternoon.
Well, we all like a nap in the afternoon. I do, certainly. But then again, this is hard work. Being president of the United States of America is a piece of cake in comparison. What did you come up with this entirely by yourself? I don't mean that in a patronising fashion. I just want to moderate the severity of my response according to the origins of the analysis, the origins of the theory.
Well, I did, because because I just think the problem with Biden is
yeah, but then immediately, surely the same problem. What happens if Kamala Harris dies?
Yes, but they give.
Well, you can't just gloss over that. I mean, if they're worried about him becoming president in circumstances X, why would they be less worried about him becoming president in circumstances Y? I wonder. Have we lost her? 10:38. I told you I was worried about the robustness of my response. Oh, really? The phone line went down. Okay. That's a relief. 11:38 is the time. Don't forget, Aggie joins us shortly with some insights into what I consider to be quite significant changes to the nature of government that Keir Starmer is ushering in, and in contrast to what was his name? The fellow with the short trousers, Rishi Sunak. That's the dude. Shaq's in Sheffield. Shaq, what would you like to say?
Hiya, mate.
Hello.
Yeah, my opinion on this is, I think the people that support Donald Trump support him because to them he seems very straightforward, and he's going to do exactly what he says when he comes into office.
Like what?
I don't know. It's just the it's just the feeling that I get from these people.
Right.
Like that, he's not a typical politician, and he's not going to weave his way through things. He's just going to do it as he says.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really, with respect, the question that I'm asking today. I kind of know that your average Donald Trump fan is either profoundly bigoted or as thick as mince, or both. And so the traditional questions we ask about political support don't apply, because he's, a convicted felon, a self-confessed sex offender, a proven serial liar. He's incapable of telling the truth. He steals secret documents from the White House. So all of the things that prove he's certainly not a traditional politician, to use your phrase, because he is so depraved and disgusting. We know that doesn't trouble his supporters, and some of them like to pretend that they perceive that as a strength, or some of them possibly do perceive that as a strength. But why would the decline of Joe Biden change the result?
Because people probably don't want someone like Joe Biden, who's steadily declining on TV.
They'd rather have a man accused of rape by his own wife.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I think even if Joe Biden was fully fit, Trump would still have.
Well, that's what that's the point of the question, isn't it? Is that how can the decline of Joe Biden be a defining factor when the binary choice between the felon, the self-confessed sex offender, the man accused of rape by his own wife, the president who steals secret documents from the heart of the American government and lies about that and everything else. I mean, that bit, oddly, heartbreaking and deeply dispiriting though it is, history has taught us that people like that can rise to power even in elective democracies. Why would Joe Biden's age-related decline be a defining factor when it would appear to be a relatively straightforward choice? You're quite right, Adrian. I should apologise. That was quite insulting to mince. I did that joke once, didn't I? Actually, I did. They clipped it up very cleverly, making it look like I was about to eat a slice of humble pie. And was that you? Did you do that? And do an James O'Brien apologises, and everyone clicks on it. And I called someone as thick as mince, and then apologised for offending mince. Katie's in Hatfield. Katie, what's going on here?
Hi, James. I was just thinking that perhaps some people might be just really quite alarmed and worried and scared about the fact that the party as a whole doesn't seem to have a process that would allow them to sort of ask Biden to step down, get him to step down. If he is mentally incompetent or becoming that way.
But yeah, I think that there is probably a sort of denialism bordering upon delusion in place, because the step is so huge that people are wary of taking it. So they're trying to talk themselves into a place where they don't have to take it. Whereas stepping away from it, the problem really is huge. And that is why I think people like George Clooney and Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado have intervened in an unprecedented fashion. The latter warning that Trump would win by a landslide. Even Nancy Pelosi is talking about the necessity of Biden deciding whether or not he's going to run. But why would... So I go back to the first caller And I would vote for a tin of rice pudding ahead of Donald Trump. The person I'm trying to identify and understand is the person that can sort of swing between the two of them, according to Joe Biden's fragility, when Donald Trump's depravity is surely a problem of an infinitely bigger order. That's the bit I don't get.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that, Trump should be in jail rather than running for president.
There's still a chance he might be, but I think that's been diminished slightly by the Supreme Court ruling. So that's the person I can't get my head around, as it were.
I think maybe the average voter doesn't really remember all the facts all the time. They only remember the things that they've seen on TV in the last week.
And here are two people, this is where the question of engagement becomes crucial. Here are two people who are my choice, and I'm making a choice between them. And if they're on the telly and if they're the presidential candidates, then there must be some sort of common ground. There must be some sort of much of a muchness, two sides of the same coin. Therefore, if one looks a bit doddery, then I will choose the other one. I think there probably is an element of that. Her approval numbers are falling, or were falling, certainly, since the first presidential debate. And as calls increase for him to quit the race, Kamala Harris's approval ratings have dipped. She remains the top choice to replace him, but and I think one of the congressmen, one of the representatives who's come out calling for Biden to pull out, has said he would support Harris. That would be Jim Clyburn. But for all the messages telling me that her polling is low, it's the highest among all of the serious contenders to replace Biden even. There's a logic to her succession as well, but she's at about 37.1 on approval and 51.2 on disapproval. On the day of the debate, she was 39.4 on approval and 49.4 on disapproval. So it's all to play for. Time now is 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:48, back to domestic politics. Which party do you think has just embarked upon an extraordinary round of infighting at the very highest level? I'm going to give you a little clue. It's not the Tories. Could we possibly have two circular firing squads underway in British politics a mere week after the last general election? Make sure you remind me before Mystery Hour to pour the tea, to spill the beans on that one. But first, Aggie Chamber is with me. We'll move on to the story that you've unearthed shortly, because first, it struck me you were on the campaign trail with these politicians. We talked in the first hour about the intimidation and bullying, and Jonathan Ashworth has been talking this morning about some of the appalling abuses that he was subjected to by people who style themselves as pro-Gaza activists. Did that tally with your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I was having conversations just this week with people who were on the campaign trail, either people who won or people who stood as candidates. And some of the stuff I heard was really, really, really grim. I mean, people talked about bullying and harassment. One MP talked of being hunted. Another person talked about being chased and shouted as she walked down the street. And a family member of hers as well was just walking by themselves, and they were filmed, shouted at. And this person as well, she was walking down the street. She said she didn't see anyone around, and then later she was sent pictures of herself as she walked down the street.
Whoa.
She didn't feel confident taking her children out, and it's not just her. I mean, she was chased out of a building, but it is not just her. Other people talked about not feeling safe taking their children out campaigning. People screamed at, told they were responsible for killing children in Gaza, and again, it's sort of the same thing, people being told they were being followed in cars and on foot. But it's really, really horrible stuff to hear, and even more horrible stuff to experience.
Yes, hard to escape the conclusion sometimes that sometimes bullies are just looking for a bandwagon to jump on in order to do their bullying, as opposed, because I can't see how this helps Palestinian children in any way, shape or form. But I suspect we're going to hear more about this story in the coming weeks, and it remains probably not as big a problem for Keir Starmer as it was before the election, but we have some of the beneficiaries of this kind of behaviour sitting in the House of Commons now. Speaking of the House of Commons, and indeed speaking of bad behaviour, Aggie, Keir Starmer has, you've discovered, already moved to, how would we describe it, to undertake some form of culture change in government.
That's right. I mean, it was one of the first things he talked about in his cabinet meeting with his new ministers. But also, he has ensured that Labour MPs, his new Labour MPs, are hearing presentations from Labour whips and from parliamentary standards commissioners. Other parties are doing this too, but Labour are really, really trying to get hold of this. And I have spoken to some MPs who have taken part in these sessions. And I mean, James, it sounds like stuff you should know, but apparently they are being told it anyway. They're basically, the message seems to be, don't get too big for your boots. Talk about power dynamics in Westminster, but basically being told, look, you're in a special place, you are not special. You are not more important than the people on the doors, you are not more important than the people that work for you. And this is the stuff that I thought was really, really striking. There were some situational case studies. So these newly elected MPs were sitting in a room and they were asked, okay, so you're an older male MP, do you invite your young researcher to your hotel suite to work? Yes or no? And should you ignore or shout at security staff and police in the palace? Yes or no? I mean, as I say, I think this should be quite easy to answer, but this is stuff they're really trying to...
It is quite easy to answer, but, you know, obviously there have been many cases recently where people, either knowingly or unknowingly, did the wrong thing in all sorts of scenarios. A problem that's more often in recent years been... for the Conservatives, but by no means exclusively. So, I mean, it's a thin line between control freakery and a sort of form of puritanical morality. What are the MPs feeling and saying about it?
I mean, they say they're pleased that this is taking part. I mean, the interesting thing with how the House of Commons works is that basically the 650 MPs all have their own, essentially, little businesses. And lots of them, you know, the newly elected ones as well that I speak to, a lot of them have never managed people, and suddenly you are appointing a team of people. You're going to be a manager, and it is difficult. And you know, they talked in these sessions about booze, and they
don't get drunk.
Don't get drunk. But there are bars. You know, there are bars in the House of Commons, and a lot of these MPs as well.
Whose name do you think of in the middle of this? Whose name pops into your head at this point, where you think about the impact that alcohol in the House of Commons can have upon our parliamentary estate?
There are too many to count.
No,
I mean,
Eric Joyce all day long.
Oh, what, the punch?
Yeah, Eric Joyce. If Eric Joyce hadn't got plastered and punched someone, Jeremy Corbyn never would have become leader of the Labour Party. It's an extraordinary little saga, that, an extraordinary set of circumstances, a timeline that go, or like a kind of domino. Toppling dominoes or a sliding doors. But you're right. I mean, you're not going to be able to steer people out of all of the subsidised bars, but reminding people not to get drunk, reminding people not to invite their researcher back to their hotel room, even if you are intending just to work upon your new speech. Starmer's not taking any risks, is he?
No. And I think, you know, reminding people that if you do something wrong, it can end up on the front of newspapers, and just reminding people, talk about egos, arrogance. You know, I think that line of, you're in a special place, but you're not special, is really important to tell people, apparently.
Hogwarts. It's the Hogwarts effect, because you look at some of these people, particularly in recent years, and you think, how can your self-importance be so immense? I suppose most recently you've got your Rees-Moggs, your Gullises, your 30Ps, and you get it on the Labour benches as well. Keith Vaz, back in the day, we've been talking about Leicester today, Keith Vaz back in the day was incredibly self-important. And you don't know whether they arrive in Parliament like that, or whether they develop that, they have it thrust upon them. But there's something about Hogwarts, about the House of Commons, but the Houses of Parliament, that is like Hogwarts, like one of the most historic Oxford colleges or Cambridge colleges. You feel as if you're important simply by being there. And if you're a member of Parliament, you probably do need a bit of a memento mori moment. You do need someone whispering in your ear, remember you are mortal. And that's what he's done here. I like that. I like that a lot. Do we have any other examples apart from the hotel room and the shouting at staff, the bullying people, treating them badly?
I mean, they talked about not being tactical with people who don't know, and with the key message as well. Another key message was, for God's sake, call things out. So if you see someone acting badly, just tell people, do not keep it quiet.
And do we have anything on what is likely to happen if someone steps out of line? How hard, how heavy? Well, a ton of bricks weighs the same as a ton of feathers, of course, but what does the ton of bricks look like?
Well, Keir Starmer has already, you know, he asked government whips to deliver this rigorous induction, but I think they want to make clear that this standards and ethics is going to be central to conduct for all Labour MPs, and I think they really do want to get this point across.
I'm trying to think what the comparison would be. So your first sort of Owen Paterson moment, or your first Chris Pincher moment, or your first example of the kind of behaviour that would once have got you into a lot of hot water, but which under Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and others didn't. Starmer will probably hang them out to dry in a nanosecond in order to demonstrate that there's a new sheriff in town.
I would imagine so. I mean, they just don't want to be besieged by scandal, do they? I mean, there was a point last session where there were more suspended MPs than there were Lib Dems. I mean, and they weren't all,
No, they were from across the house.
They were, and one was, Matt Hancock, because he'd gone to Australia to do I'm a Celeb, but some were for really, really bad things, which sometimes they denied. But, they will want, I think all parties want this to be a new session and new start.
And are you across this Johnny Mercer development, or has that just happened while you've been in this studio with me? So Johnny Mercer, I think, was seeking to no longer the Veterans Minister, no longer even a Member of Parliament, but he was refusing, wasn't he, to hand over his sources on a story about misconduct in the armed forces, and he was informed that there was a risk of prosecution for some of the people involved. He's lost his application.
Oh, yes. It's been refused.
Which means he has until 4 o'clock on Thursday, the 25th of July, or he could be in court again and potentially jailed for refusing to hand over the names of sources and witnesses.
Goodness.
That's quite the development. He's not having a great month, is he, Johnny Mercer? Thank you, Aggie Chamber. Great stuff, our new political correspondent. It's the Reform UK Limited party who are all fighting like rats in a sack already. To be fair, and it's not often I say this, you've got the former deputy leader complaining that he's been replaced as deputy leader by the last leader, by the new leader, who's also the owner. And you can't get rid of the owner, stroke leader, unless he decides to go, because he owns it and leads it. So Richard Tice has been installed as deputy leader by Nigel Farage, and Ben Habib, the bloke on Question Time, talking about shooting asylum seekers in boats, of shooting boats full of asylum seekers, whatever the semantics may be. He's now having a hissy fit on social media about being sacked. So the moral of the story probably has something to do with the wisdom of trusting Nigel Farage. Even if you are, I don't know, his wife, or even if you are one of his closest colleagues. I'll read you this tweet because there's not going to be anywhere near as much hilarity, I don't think, in Parliament as there has been in recent years. So thank goodness for Reform UK Limited. I have just been informed, writes Ben Habib, that Nigel Farage, that Richard Tice is taking over as deputy leader of the party. And then he explains helpfully, consequently, I no longer hold that position. Yeah, I'm glad he's helped out with that. I am considering my position more generally in light of this change. I have long held concerns about the control of the party and the decision-making process. I will reflect on all of this. So there, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party revealing that he's long held concerns of the Reform UK Limited Party, revealing that he's long held concerns about the control of the party and the decision-making process. The control of the party is, as I've just described it to you, entirely in the hands of the majority shareholder, who recently installed himself as leader and has now sacked the previous deputy leader and replaced him with the bloke that he replaced as leader when he decided to become leader. And as the majority shareholder, he could become leader. But at least we can all agree that this is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy, transparency and accountability looks like. It's time now for Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. And because we had an election last week. We did do it last week, didn't we? We did do it last Thursday. It just feels like so long ago. How long ago does the election feel like now to you? Don't ring in with that question, because it doesn't have a definitive answer. And that's the only rule of Mystery Hour. All questions must have a definitive answer.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, there we are. 3 minutes after 12. Leave politics in the fridge for a moment and immerse yourselves instead into a world of trivia and illumination, of facts and figures, of erudition and education. It is your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. The way it works is that you ring in with a question to which you know there must be an answer, but you are damned if you can find it. And then someone else ideally rings in with the answer, and I ask them how they know the answer to that question, and they tell me. So when I say, what are your qualifications, it doesn't mean that you have to say, oh, I have a PhD in applied mathematics. You could just say, I heard it on your programme last week, James, or I saw it on the telly last night, or I have a PhD in applied mathematics. All are valid answers to the question, what are your qualifications? Because the question, or rather the answer, is how you know it. How do you know that thing that you've just told us? Don't send me messages complaining that you can't get through. Don't forget, Rami, when you're listening on catch-up. No, a man was not caught with 104 turtles down his trousers. It was 104 snakes. I've already answered that question, but you can probably hear that. You're probably listening to this about an hour behind where we currently are. A nice moment, though, to remind you that with Global Player you can rewind and pause live radio. Should we crack straight on? I don't think we need much. Oh, crikey, there's a prize. There's an amazing prize, a brilliant prize for my favourite contribution of the day. You can win a Mystery Hour board game. Absolutely beautiful bit of kit. Yours for the price of a brilliant question or answer, or just a winning contribution. It may be your personal charm, your charisma that shines through rather than your actual words. 0345 6060 is the number you need to play. The full terms and conditions for the conversation competition are at lbc.co.uk. And if you want to buy a Mystery Hour board game or find out more about it, you can do so at mysteryhour.co.uk. Thank you very much. I remembered it all. Rob's in Cargreen in Cornwall. Rob, question or answer?
A question, please, James, if that's okay.
Carry on, yeah, absolutely.
It's a little bit niche. I play a lot of tennis and I watch a lot of tennis. I love the game and I know everyone's watching it this fortnight. But I've always been interested in the tennis ball, you know, the way they're made from those sort of two pieces of felt glued together. And there's a really crude seam that sort of runs around the whole tennis ball.
Yes.
And it just strikes me that you know, in this day and age, the ball should be completely covered in felt. I don't see that seam offers anything in terms of like spin or the flight of the ball. And I imagine it's a sort of throwback to when they used to manufacture it. It was too difficult to completely cover it in felt, so you ended up with this crude bit. But you look at balls in other sports. You know, they're all fancy these days, and they're all super slick and what have you. No one kicks a football with laces or anything. Why do tennis balls still look like they've been glued together by a 3-year-old?
I love this question. I wonder if you've answered it though, accidentally.
In what way?
Is it definitely two pieces? Are we confident of that?
Yeah, I'm confident that they're two sort of figure-of-8 shapes.
Well, maybe it's the glue. Maybe you have to have a kind of landing strip.
I know. I appreciate that, but I think I don't think that's. I'm not sure.
But if the glue touched the felt, we'd be in a right old state, wouldn't we?
No, what you've got is the seam is sort of like the rubber underneath. That's all around the ball anyway. But you could cover them. If you go into a beach shop, say, you know, and, you know, somebody to kick around on the beach, you see loads of these big, massive balls, felt balls, and there's no seam on them or anything. They're completely covered in felt. I would have thought that would give a smoother flight.
Yeah, I would as well. I would as well.
More uniform contact, you know, when you're hitting it with the racket. I realise it's really niche, but
I don't think it's niche at all. This is Mystery Hour, mate. Everything's niche, isn't it? You can't really ask a question of universal application or universal interest.
Very well said.
Yeah, you're on.
Is it a money-saving thing as well? You know, just would putting that little bit of extra felt cost the manufacturers that bit more? I don't know.
Who's going to win Wimbledon?
Oh, I'm not very good at doing predictions.
Are you not? Because I love tennis, but I've noticed...
I'm obsessed with it. I thought Sinner was going to win, but sadly, I was there last week and I saw him, and he was absolutely fantastic.
He did great in his first game, didn't he? But it felt... I would have described myself as someone who loves tennis, but watching this year's tournament, I've realised that I'm nowhere near as clued up on it as I used to be. I think it goes back to lockdown. I don't think I've ever got right. And also Andy Murray, I suppose, not being as prominent or going as far in tournaments as he used to do. But it's a bit of a weird one, that, when you suddenly realise that you don't know sort of 3 or 4 of the top 10 players.
It's the changing of the guard, isn't it?
There is a changing of the guard underway as well
for so many years, we've just been used to 4 names, really, that you've got to get your head around, and now...
Cool.
It's great. But thank you for...
Great question. No, I like it. I like one. New balls, please. It's 8 minutes after 12. David's in Macclesfield. David, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Okay, right. I've always wondered why bathrooms or toilets in hospitals don't have a closure lid. They're always just, you got the single rim you sit on.
The seat. The seat.
Yeah, the seat. Yeah.
Yeah, the toilet seat.
Yeah, there's no one. You can't close them. There's no. You think about the bacteria and how it spreads and everything else.
Yeah.
You think they have a closing lid, but there's not.
No, I think you've answered your question.
Why?
What would a lid be except a receptacle for more bacteria? It'd be filthy. You've got no lid. It's cleaner.
Well, it just need cleaned.
This might need some work. This answer. But I think that's probably it. Are we definitely sure this is true? I don't want to pry, David, inappropriately, but have you spent a lot of time in hospital?
Well, I have actually, yes.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad that things are all right now. And how much research would you say you had undertaken into the presence or not of lids on lavatories in hospitals?
Well, I just thought I would have helped to keep bacteria in rather than...
No, I understand the question. I want to know how confident we are that there are no lids on hospital bogs.
100%.
100%. Never seen one. Man or boy?
You might have seen an odd one.
This is what I'm worried about. You see, you might have just... All right, it's on the list. It's on the board. I'll see what I can do. Why are there no lids on hospital toilets? These are two mystery hour questions for the ages, neither of which we've had before. Why are tennis balls so rubbish looking? You could have a nice round uniform felting on a tennis ball. Why have they got these snaky lines on them? And secondly, why are there no lids on hospital toilets? 0345 6060 973. It's 10 minutes after 12. Fanny is in Cheltenham. Fanny, question or answer?
Well, I've got both, but I phoned up with a question, but the loo thing...
No, do not come on here and ride roughshod over all the rules and regulations. Do you know what your problem is, Fanny?
What's that?
You don't think that you should abide by the network of obligations that binds the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boris.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boris. What's your question?
My question is, why in sport is a heat called a heat?
Oh, we're on a roll today. That's 3 questions in a row that I'm fairly confident, A, we've never done before, and B, I'm absolutely... Well, I don't know the answer in the first instance.
I have been so desperate to look it up on the internet, but every time this show comes on, I go, one day I'll phone up, and today I'm here.
And you've done it finally.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like it comes from the Latin or the French or anything like that, does it?
No.
Why is it called a heat? You're on.
Why is it called a heat?
I love it. Why is it called a heat? We shall endeavour to find out for you. Thank you, Fanny. Cole's in Birmingham, even. Cole, question or answer?
Hey, James, it's a question, please. Another one for the pile, because I can't answer any of the other questions.
No, it's a good one this week. Carry on.
So my 11-year-old yesterday, and I've slept on this, it didn't enter my head when he asked me at the time yesterday, but I thought about it this morning.
Yes.
At half-time and full-time, there's a
Your
very
surname's not Palmer, is it, by any chance? Because if it is, I can get you on the breakfast show.
No, I wish.
Oh, all right, carry on.
At half-time and full-time, there's a very distinctive cadence whistle blow in a football match. Why? What's the origin of it? Where does that come? I've got lots of questions here.
Well, no, we need to zone in on it, because I'll give you that. I mean, it needs to be specific so that they know that it's the end of play rather than just a free kick or a foul or it's to let everybody know that's it. So you need a different.
But what's the origin of that specific sound? Because it's a very distinctive, specific sound, isn't it?
Can you do it?
And it's always the same. I can probably try whistle it.
Go on.
Should we give it a go?
Yeah. I'm just going to get my Chirpomatic app out and see if I can. You need to be here for yesterday's show to fully appreciate that moment. That was pretty good. One of the best answers we ever had on Mystery Hour came from a fellow who was the official archivist of a whistle manufacturer just up the road from you. It was in Birmingham.
There's a lot of that in the
around the jewellery quarter down there in that bit, isn't it? So he might know. But why that tune? Because it's always the same, which means it must be something they teach in referee school.
There must be a ref or an historian listening who can help us out with this. I don't want to Google it. I thought that was a good one for today.
Yeah, it is. It's a cracker. Thank you, Cole. Lovely question. So, why are tennis balls not felty all over? Why are there no lids on hospital toilets? Why are heats in sporting competitions called heats? And where does the tune, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a tune, is it? What do they call it when you, like, you know, when you turn your computer on and you get a sort of ding, 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 ding? That is there a word for that? It's like a few notes, but not enough notes to be a tune. Why are you all looking at me like I'm stupid? No, well, that's fine then, but don't look at me as if the question is stupid. It's you don't know an answer to it. That means you're stupid. I don't know either, but I thought of asking the question. What is it? A sonic tag? Really? Sounds painful. Ren's in Edgware. Ren, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Ren.
Can I tell you how much I love you as well? You're like our friend. You're just the best you are. Thank you.
What a lovely thing to say.
Thank you for everything you do. We talk about you like you're our friend at home.
I am your friend.
What did James say?
Yeah, who's we?
Me and my husband.
Oh, thank you, Ren. That's such a lovely thing to hear. Thank you. But anyway, what's the question?
My question is, so can you tell from a shell where it's from?
Oh, I thought the whole question was going to rhyme then. Can you tell from a shell how it smells? Can you tell from a shell?
The ocean, hopefully.
What you mean?
Yeah. So we have shells. We have shells from, various holidays.
Yes.
They're in like pretty jars and.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Them on boxes, and can you tell? Because they're all mixed up now. But if you gave it to somebody clever, could they tell? Okay, this shell is from. You can tell from genetics. Our genetics where we're
I
from
bet
as
you
well.
can, because would I be right in thinking you don't read a lot of crime fiction? No, because they do soil. The one I'm reading at the moment is they're doing some soil and sand analysis, and they will be able to identify whether the body was moved from place A to place B, or So I bet you do similar with shells, certainly with crushed up shells, which is what some beaches are made of.
Yes.
I love this. I love this question, but that means there'd be some sort of database. And how big is it? So if I've got a bit of shell stuck in my boot, would they be able to say, oh, that's from a certain beach in Thailand, for example?
Yeah, but it wouldn't even have to be specific to the beach, right? Some of my shells are from Thailand, but even from the part of the world.
Yeah, but how can they do it with soil then?
But isn't it does soil move around like shells do?
No, but it's got a different it's got a more complicated makeup probably, so it's easier to specify. They do it, well, it's a brilliant question. Do shells have DNA? Mike's had a go at a poem. He said, can you tell from a shell where it fell?
But do shells fall?
No, that's rubbish. This is better. James has gone for, can you tell from a shell where it did dwell?
Oh, I like that. I'll share the mystery. I'll share the game. If I get it.
That's a bit presumptuous. Oh, really? Oh, now it's coming out. All that soft soaping at the beginning of this call. All that buttering up.
Oh, no, we do love you. You're the best. You are.
Thank you, Red, and to your husband as well. 12:17 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Don't ring in to answer the silly questions I come up with on the back of other proper questions. I don't know. I think it's called a chime when you turn on your computer and it goes bing, 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 or something like that. But is that what word would you use to describe the referee's whistle? Is it a tune or a chime? I don't know. But it's not important, because that's not what the question was. That's not what Cole asked us. The question is, where does it come from? The very distinct series of notes that the referee blows on his whistle at full-time or half-time. Where does it come from? I quite like that from Alex as well. He says, I just tuned into Shell BC. Dan's in Medway. Dan, question or answer?
It's a question, please.
Yeah.
When I take my shower head out of the shower holder and lower it down to wash my body, the water gets hotter, and I can't work out why. And it's not just my particular shower. It's in hotels and other, previous residents.
Have you had this conversation with anyone else?
Yeah, do you know what? The producer asked the same question. I haven't had the confidence to ask anyone.
No, but here you are in front of 1.4 million people, potentially.
I mean,
but no one can see you, Dan. No one can see you. So in ways you are feeling anonymous, even as you ask this question, aren't you?
Exactly. You've got it.
Because I don't think it's possible.
I knew you was going to say that. I've said.
But you've got hair. Can I? Are you quite hairy?
No, quite the opposite. If
but are you bald?
Being honest. No, not from the top.
Have you got a full head of hair? Yeah, but that's all right. I don't need to know any other details.
No.
You've got a full head of hair.
I do.
And the water is landing on that. And then when you take...
This could be if it's hitting my back. You know, I've stepped forward. It's not hitting my
so
hair.
So if you lower the spray from your chest to your knee, you think it is getting hotter at each...
Hotter. Definitely.
Every inch, every 2 inches, every 6 inches?
I mean, it does feel gradual. The lower it gets, the hotter it gets.
I'm putting it on the board, but I mean, I can't see how this would be true. Pressure might change. Pressure probably would change slightly, and that's the
only thing I could think of. But I would have thought it got colder because the cold water's not having to work as hard in the system, not hotter.
Yeah, but then it's going downhill.
I still don't like this question going downhill, if I'm honest, but...
I like the question. I don't know who would be able to answer it. I suppose some sort of physicist. All right, you're on. I like it, Dan. Take it easy. So you're in the shower, right? Showering your head. Bald or hairy, makes no difference. Feeling a certain temperature, and then you take, I'm just going to give the old body a bit of a sluice. So you take the shower out of the shower head, and, it's gone a bit colder. Not a lot colder, but it's gone a bit colder around the sort of nipple area, and then you get around the thighs, it's got colder still, and by the time you're washing your feet, it's practically Arctic. Is that feasible? Does it happen? 0345 60 60973. I think it might do, actually. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. Dean is in Enfield. Dean, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, mate.
So it's to do with the hospital and the toilet seat.
Fantastic. Go on.
So basically, it's all to do with government regulations around something called Doc M. And Doc M stipulates anything that's for disabled access or people with generally movement issues or anything like that, stipulates whether it's even the cistern has to have a bigger lever on it or a big button, anything like that, anything that's hard of movement, so i.e. an extra seat to lift up would make it harder access for people with disability issues. So basically that's why they don't have a toilet seat on it, because of Doc M regulations.
It makes perfect sense. Access to and use of buildings.
Yeah, basically.
And there'd be lots and lots of other stuff. Qualifications?
I work in the bathroom distribution industry, so yes, I could probably answer the other one about the shower head as well, but obviously I'm not allowed to.
No, you better not. just to be on the safe side. Dean, can I ask you a question?
Go.
What do we think about baths in bedrooms?
It's a very niche kind of thing, yes. I mean, it was generally more traditional kind of setups that have it, and obviously you do get, some kind of fancy.
Yeah, that's what I'm into. That's right, because I think we're about to get ours done, and I'm very drawn to this. We went away for the weekend, and there was a bath in the bedroom, and I thought it added a whole new dimension.
Yeah, I mean, my point of view is probably my partner wouldn't want to see me getting out of the bath when she's in bed.
No, that's true. She could close her eyes.
Well, yeah.
But you can have a nice chat. You can have a nice chat.
It depends how long it takes me to get out of the bath as well.
Well, not just when you're getting out. You can have a chat while you're in it. I'm a fan, but I think that Mrs. O'Brien's going to need a little bit of persuading on this one. And I was hoping you might give me some ammo, but frankly, you haven't.
Yeah, no,
you haven't helped. All I've got now is an image of you.
Not for me.
We've got no. Round of applause for Dean, please. Lovely work. Dave's in Norfolk. That's a bit vague. Whereabouts in Norfolk?
Rudham.
Rudham?
Yes.
Have we done this before?
We have, yeah.
Were you thatching? Were you thatching a roof last time?
Oh no, just carpentry work.
That was it.
You mentioned a certain pub in Rudham.
Yeah, I did. The Crown. Yeah, I was about to show off my knowledge of Norfolk pubs again, but given that it's exactly the same audience as last time, I won't bother. Can we change Dave's address from Norfolk to Rudham, please, so that I don't do this 3 times on the trot? Question or answer, Dave?
Since the pub, they've put a picture of you up in the pub bar, basically.
They what?
They've put a picture of you in the pub.
Yeah, that's because I'm barred.
James, I was on holiday. It's a question. I was on holiday about a month ago in a nice Greek island, and I'm curious of how much revenue the island keeps and how much they send back to mainland Greece.
Because they've got regional government of sorts. But wouldn't that be the same as how much? Does it all go back to central government and then come out again like it would with council money?
Yes, basically. Yeah, because obviously the island has to be.
Well, it's not going to be. It's not going to hold true across all countries, is it? Different countries will have different rules. Crete. Where were you? What island?
Kos.
Oh, no, I've not been to Kos. Was it nice?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
How hot was it,
windy,
though?
But there we are.
How hot was it?
33.
Oh, no, that's not too bad. The wind can be misleading. I'm worried. We're off in a week and a half, but it's so hot at the moment. I'm worried I might melt. Anyway, this is the question that needs an answer to it. When you're on holiday on an island, and you know, we'll take anything on this. So it could be Greece, it could be Spain. How much of what's the economic arrangement with the mainland? How does the government? How does it work? So you pay £100 in Kos. How much of it ends up in Athens? I like it. Dave, thank you. Take care. 26 minutes after 12. Give my love to everyone in the crowd. So they have no idea who I am, of course, but it's nice. It's the thought that counts. James is in Gillingham. James, question or answer?
Oh, it's a question, James.
Yes.
Please.
Carry on.
I was hanging the washing out earlier on, and a little spider, one of those little spiders that hides in the clothes pegs sometimes, came down, went down about 2 feet, and then on its thread, and then pretty well immediately it came up again. And my question is, what happens to that thread? Because it can't eat it, because it would be the equivalent of you or I being a spider having an eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch rope, and then
so where does it go? So they come down and then they kind of take it back in again.
Well, yeah, but I don't know whether they reel it up, but then there's no sign of that, and what do they do with it? So that's my question.
Nice.
Really,
it's a nice question. That.
Thank you.
Isn't it? So it's not why are they doing it? It's just literally here is a metre of web. What's the correct word? Not web. What's the
thread?
Thread will do. Is it thread? Anyway, here's a metre of it. Where's it gone when the spider goes back up again?
Because very briefly, it'd be the equivalent of us having a 50, 60 foot length of.
Yeah, it would do, and it's not climbing it and then leaving it behind it. It's going back into the spider. We think probably
that or whatever. Yeah.
That's a good question. It's on the board. Spiders, islands, shower heads, shells, football whistles, heats and tennis. Still need answers, please. 0345 606 0973. Matt's been in touch. He says, could you please pass a message to James O'Brien as follows? What do you think this is? The BBC? It just appears in front of me, Matt, and I decide whether I'm going to read it out or not. There's not some sort of team of top staff going through my correspondence. I am a hospital cleaner, and the toilets on almost all wards do have seats. I knew it. I said to David, didn't I? I said, are you sure? Have you done enough research? But we've also got our answer to that question, which is that when they don't have seats, it will be because of document M. Was it M? I think it was document M. Actually, I'm going to tell you exactly what document it was, because these things matter. It was document M. Document M, access to and use of buildings. Will's in Camberwell. Will, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Will.
I'm just packing for a festival in Wales, and I found some army military food ration packs from when I was a scout back in the day.
Where did you find them?
Well, my parents recently came up. They moved house after 38 years, and they dropped a huge bag of stuff and said, this is yours now, own it.
Oh,
and
fair
I
enough.
chucked some of it away. But
yeah.
So I've got a half pint of mulligatawny soup, oxtail soup, rolled oats mix, and sugar, coffee, but it was packaged in 1992.
1992. Tinned or dried? Is it tinned or dried?
It's in paper thingy.
So it's dried?
Dried, but in sealed bags, dried, yeah.
So dehydrated food?
Correct.
Did you get any glucose tablets or spangles?
I can't see that, although I can see orange powder.
Do you know what you've done?
Is that the same thing?
Yeah, the orange powder is quite nice, but I bet you ate the spangles in 1992. Because you used to, certainly in the cadet force that I was compelled to do on occasion, when we went on hikes, the ration packs always had a packet of spangles in them. Happy days.
Well, there was 10 tours back on Dartmoor we used to do with the Scouts and stuff.
And there's no dates anywhere on the packaging. Twice. You can't find any dates anywhere on the packaging.
Only packaged in 1992, it says. It doesn't say best before, because it's all military types, isn't it?
Yeah,
November 1992.
So Will be able to eat his 1992 dehydrated ration packs?
Exactly.
That's the question. When are you off? When's the festival?
It's actually started now. It's the Love Trails Festival in the Gower Peninsula. I'm not really a festival goer normally, but I am a runner, so I can't wait to get there.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
I can't leave until I get an answer.
So it's not a swingers festival or something like that. It's people who love trails.
Exactly.
Not a love trails.
I mean, I love
trails.
No, exactly that.
Yeah. Oh, well, have fun. I'll get you an answer by 1 o'clock, mate. Seriously. Otherwise, you're going to have to stop at a service station on the way and stock up on some supplies. It is coming. It's just gone 12:30. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 12 is the time. Do shells have DNA? I.e., if I give you a shell, can you tell me where it came from? Why does Dan's shower water get hotter? He's holding the shower head. It gets hotter as it makes its way. It all sounds a bit Mills and Boone. This. Why does the water get hotter as it makes its way down Dan's body? Islands. When you're on holiday, how much of the money that you spend on the island goes back to the mainland? Where does a spider's web go when a spider goes back up its web? Can Will eat his army ration packs from 1992 this weekend? Where does the succession of notes that a referee whistles at full time come from? Why do we talk about heats in sporting events, like the different rounds, we also call them? Why are they called heats? And I've actually been given a tennis ball. Do you know what they said to me? They said, James, here's a tennis ball. It'd be really good for YouTube. So hi, YouTubers. I've got a tennis ball with me here, and the question we're asking on Mystery Hour is, why do tennis balls have... This isn't going to work on the radio, but this is just some exclusive content for the YouTubers, for the... What do we call them? The JOBers. Is that... You've got to have a thing like that, like Swifties. Jobbers? Here's the tennis ball. This bit here, I mean, why does it have... Why isn't it just all nice and furry all the way around, instead of having these strange... grooves, these strange rubbery grooves in them? Perry's in Croydon. Perry, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Perry.
So I think it's an answer to your why does water get hotter when you take the shower head off the handle or the holder. When it goes, water pressure with cold water and hot water is a lot lower. So as you bring the head off and down more to the level of where the water is coming in, yes, from the pipework, it has less distance to travel up with that pressure, so it will come out hotter. Well, more hot water will come out with the cold, which makes it feel hotter, or does make it hotter.
I think I understand. So it's working less hard?
Yeah, it has to work less hard because it has to travel all the way up the hose to get to the top.
So when I said it's going downhill, I was sort of almost knocking at the door of a correct answer.
You pretty much got it. Look
at that. Qualifications?
I've fitted bathrooms for a long time, but general builder, carpenter, joiner.
What do we think about the old bath in the bedroom, mate?
I think if you are maybe a young couple with no kids at the house, or an older couple with kids out of the house, might be nice to spice things up. But outside of that,
no, I wasn't thinking of it like that. I just thought I'd want to, like, sitting there reading a book on a Sunday morning and catching up with your beloved on.
I see. Well, if you have a good view, I imagine, put it by the windows out to the balcony in your room. That would be perfect.
Could be nice.
Yeah.
Round of applause for Perry. Great answer.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you go. Thank you. 12:37 is the time. Matt's in Finchley. Matt, question or answer?
It's an answer for you, James.
Carry on.
Must admit, I thought you were giving me a huge build-up then when you said you got the tennis ball in front of you and you're going to come straight to me. But
so that's the one you're answering. Well, I mean, it is a huge build-up. So everything you say, I'm going to examine.
Yeah, terrified now.
In real time. So go on. Why? Why has it got it?
Well, first of all, there's a few kind of different reasons, but the first one, obviously, you can't just have one piece of felt, because at some point you'd have to stitch it right to join it together around. Yes. Yeah. So originally they used literal hand stitching, and then
really?
they tried. back in the olden days.
Yeah.
Now they have, as you can see, like this, I think it's rubber. Well, yeah, it is rubber that's now the seam. And you'll notice that it's in two identical shapes.
Yes.
So it fits together perfectly. So, yeah, that's kind of why you can't physically have one piece of fur. But there's also...
So that's where it's glued? That's like the rubber. The rubber is hot.
Of felt. Yeah, there's two pieces of felt, and they're stitched together, but they use.
But they're not stitched; they're fused together now.
Yeah, that's right.
And if their felt covered all of it, they just wouldn't be able to fuse it. You'd have a really weird, gloopy mess all around the side of the board.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's what I said.
There's also benefits from an actual.
Sorry, that was me. I'm just going to bounce this one. Wait there.
Well, you can do a test now. If you spin the ball forwards and backwards, you'll be able to now, with the seams, if you're on the court, you'll identify whether someone's hit a topspin shot, a slice shot, what kind of...
Yeah, that's not the reason why they're there, though. That's just why they're useful.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
I like it.
So, yeah, this is my second tennis question I've answered for you. I'm hoping to get a reputation like Professor Hal in 50 years.
There's going to be fewer questions on tennis than there is on the entirety of the world of science.
They're very few and far between, but I'm here every week for them just in case.
Who's going to win the Wimbledon?
Oh, that's a good one.
It's not a mystery, our question, obviously.
No, I mean, Alcaraz, I hope can defend it, but... yeah, I think he's got the edge. Djokovic's knee's a little bit iffy.
You can never rule him out, can you?
Well, I'd be a bit silly to say that. But
is Fritz still in it?
No, he lost yesterday in 5 to the Italian.
I told you I wasn't paying as much attention as I usually do. I quite liked Fritz. Qualifications, please, Matt?
I play a lot of tennis, as I said previously, so I played quite a high level, but that's it, really.
Round of applause for Matt, our tennis expert, our resident tennis, Professor Matt, our resident tennis. Thank you, mate. There you go. Clayton is in Saffron Walden. Clayton, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on, mate.
Why is it, whenever your hands are covered in something, do you get an itchy nose?
You don't, though, do you? Not every... No, you don't.
Most of the time, you always do. It's like on the bridge. I was making some Dutch snacks yesterday for the football match.
Dutch snacks? What's a Dutch? This is, I mean, that's for eating, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I made some bitter ball and some croquettes.
Oh, get you. I love this. Getting into the spirit of things with some sort of relevant ethnic cuisine.
Yes.
You could have just put some mayonnaise on your chips and saved yourself all the hassle, couldn't you?
Could have done, yeah, but they were delicious.
Yeah, I like it. So you're all covered in batter?
Flour, batter, breadcrumbs, meat, you name it. And the moment my hands were covered in that stuff, I started to get an itchy nose.
Can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Were you expecting to get an itchy nose?
No.
Yeah, you were.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, you were.
No, I wasn't, because my nose I don't normally get an itchy nose, but it happens when your hands are covered in stuff.
Oh, I don't know that it does.
What
did you do? Did you use your sleeve?
I tried to use the back of my hand.
Yeah, risky.
But it doesn't get, you tend to still get a bit messy. And so in the end, I had to wash my hands because it just doesn't go away till you scratch it.
Should have used pincers. Not to do the nose, to do the coating of the croquettes.
Well, I learned quite quickly, and I just had lots of spoons in every different.
Yeah, that's it.
Coverage.
You do learn quite quickly because I do a nice chicken parmigiana.
Oh, really?
You like a schnitzel?
Yes.
So you've got your flour, your egg, and your breadcrumbs. Mm-hmm. And if you try and do that with your hands, then it's going to be like you've got oven gloves made of batter on by the time you get to the second or third schnitzel. But I never got an itchy nose.
But you're using pincers. Your hands aren't getting dirty.
No, that's why I use pincers, because I used to use my hands, and I realised what a mess it made. I was all over the shop. But I like it. Look at us, pair of chefs. Thank you, Clayton. The question is on the board. I mean, there's no unlikely to be any biological explanation of this, but is there any truth at all in Clayton's theory that when his hands are covered in gunk, he always gets an itchy nose? 03456060973 is the number that you need. John's in Stockton-on-Tees. John, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Have you got an itchy nose?
I certainly don't.
No, carry on now. Some people do. So just talking about it, it's like sneezing. Anyway, go on. What have we got?
Yeah. So I'm just going to challenge the cooling effect of the shower head.
Oh no. So, that's a steward's inquiry.
I am afraid it is. Yeah. I could probably give a little bit of credence to the previous answer, and I'll give them some credit for that, but I think we're looking at cooling effects. So if the temperature of the water that leaving the nozzle is X, and you've got a spray of water, so you've got quite a lot of surface air being exposed to air, it's going to be cooled. So the temperature at the head, when the water reaches the person's head, is X minus Y.
Yeah.
Now, if you take it off the holder and bring it closer to your body, less time to cool, and feel appreciatively warmer.
Oh, so the gap is smaller.
The gap is smaller, and there's less surface air being exposed to air, less cooling effect taking place. Also, the lower limbs are likely to feel a little bit cooler as well, so they're going to feel appreciatively warmer.
I think you can both be right, can't you, on this?
Potentially, yeah.
I'm going with that. I'm going with the qualifications.
Diagnostic radiographer, study heat removal for heat X-ray tubes, heat dissipation on bodies in MRI scanners, that sort of thing.
I was about to tease you and say, no, I don't mean that sort of qualification. I mean, how do you know this thing that you know about shower heads? But actually, it is part of your radiography qualifications that have given you the education on the question of heat retention and diffusion. Round of applause for John, please. That was a lovely answer. We're a bit short of answers, aren't we? Hopefully we've got a lot more coming. I'm just going to write that. John there. And William is in Chinon in France. William, question or answer?
Got an answer.
Carry on then.
So the spider web question.
Oh, yes.
So basically there's hundreds of species of spiders, but there's two different ways that they sort of recycle the silk. So a lot of them do eat it. Yeah. And then
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
They eat it, digest it, and then re-secrete it again?
Reuse.
Well, I see.
Yeah. But the answer to the actual question is the ones that sort of drop down and speed back up.
Yes.
They don't have time to eat it in that time, so they just bundle it up with their back legs.
Really?
Yeah, and I've seen them do it because I've got into macro photography, like spiders and insects.
Really close up, really tight close-ups of tiny little things.
Yeah, I use my phone, so I have to be within like half an inch or so of the spiders to get in close enough to see the detail.
And you can see they're bundling up a little ball of silk between their back legs. Well, you say back legs, it's a spider. They've got 8 legs.
Yeah, but it is the back legs, yeah.
Well, how can it be the back?
Usually because they...
Oh, they've still got a front, haven't they? They've got eyes, so it's like the back too. Legs 6 and 7.
I think it's the back too. Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens to it?
They can reuse it.
But do they can they unravel it again immediately? Can they go up and down like a yo-yo?
I haven't seen them do that, but I presume they can, or they can probably just...
There's a finite amount. But then that's why they don't drop down like 8 meters, because they wouldn't be able to... Oh, I'm going to give you the round of applause. In fact, is that what it's called? Macro photography?
Yeah, macro. I got into that the last couple of years, so I sort of published my photos on Instagram and just an extra hobby.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I love it. A round of applause for William, please. There we go. That's the answer to James's question on the spiders. William and James. It's 12:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I got to channel Stuart Lee for a moment and point out you can't say anything anymore without being called a racist, can you? Neville's been in touch to say shocking xenophobia from Mr. James O.B. on Twitter. Dutch cuisine is about much more than mayonnaise on fries. We put mayonnaise on lots of other deep-fried foods too. And that's only half of the controversy spawned by that throwaway line about mayonnaise on chips, or fries, if you prefer. An awful lot of people from Belgium claiming that it's Belgian, not Dutch. It could be both. It's a bit like hummus, this, but we'd better not go there. 12:49 is the time. Lots of questions needing answers. Madison is on the Gold Coast in Australia. Madison, question or answer?
I've got an answer.
Carry on.
Okay, so the caller who said, can I eat these rations?
Will.
Yeah, Will.
Yeah.
He can eat those rations.
Yeah.
But it's going to taste really bad and make him kind of sick.
Well, I think, I don't know you know this, but what he meant was, can I eat these rations and it will all be okay?
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously, it's going to be fine. He just might have a bit of a ill tummy for a little bit.
But he won't. So we'll advise him not to do it then, because it's not like he's
Well,
he's
I
not on
mean-
a desert island with nothing else to eat. He's on his way
but
to
he's
a
in
festival.
He's in a festival where it's 14 quid for chips.
That's a good. Yeah, but he could buy food. That's very true, with or without mayonnaise. Probably costs
True.
extra. What are your
Exactly.
qualifications?
So I've actually eaten an MRE, a meal ready to eat, from the 60s.
Why?
I was obsessed with like military stuff, and it came up. It was like an MRE pack thing I found in like a surplus shop, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna buy this MRE. Surely it's fine. Opened it up. I didn't eat the beef or anything because
It was dehydrated. It was dehydrated.
Dehydrated,
So like
yeah,
the little
dehydrated.
lumps of meat you get in a pot noodle or something like that.
Yeah, kind of, but it's more like a hard sort of square of what can be described as meat, quote unquote.
Ah.
Yeah. So I didn't eat that, but I started on the crackers, and I thought the crackers were that bad. I'm not eating the meat.
Yeah. I mean, how can
And
a crack? What was wrong with the crackers?
Oh, honestly, you know those.
It's just
rich tea
50-year-old food, mate.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah,
you
I know
know,
you know.
when you're 16, you do what you want to do. You know.
It's an adventure. Okay, so and you didn't get ill just from the crackers.
Oh no! I mean, I had the crackers, and then it was a bit sort of, oh, I'm not sure about this, and then sort of sniffed the beef, and that was enough to make me feel a bit sick.
I'm not having it. So was it just beef and crackers in the pack?
It was beef, crackers, and there was like some coffee.
Yeah, you'd
some
be all right
sugar,
with that. That
that's
would be
okay.
fine. That would be no
Yeah.
spangles.
No spangles. No.
That's outrageous. Okay, I like it. Qualifications, I ate some from the 60s. So I think that what Will was asking was, should I eat it? To which we would both say no, even if chips are
Correct.
14 quid at a festival. But you know, there is no better qualification than having done it yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
No, thank you. What time is it on the Gold Coast?
Oh, it's 10 to 10 in the evening.
Okay, that's a nice time to listen. That's a different vibe for you than for people listening in daylight hours. 12:52. Simon's in Henley-on-Thames. Simon, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
And it's a further update on the tennis ball
Yes.
question. You can't actually wrap a tennis ball, as sort of indicated by your previous caller, in a single piece of felt because it will, of course, crease. But the origins are sort of unclarified by him, and in fact, they're still handmade for real tennis today.
Oh, are they still? Gosh.
The origins of the original tennis ball were from real tennis in Henry VIII's day, and all tennis balls were hand sewn. Lawn tennis became a derivative of real tennis only hundreds of years later, and they developed a soft ball to play with, but of course they wrap it with a single piece of felt. So they would have been hand sewn.
Well, you live and learn.
As of today, on the 47 courts in the world, every single real tennis ball is handmade.
Qualifications?
And hand sewn. I am chairman of a real tennis club, and I play real tennis.
We've done this before.
No, we haven't actually.
Have we not? Well, there's someone else who plays real tennis has rung in. There can't be that many of you.
No, there's only about 5,000, I think.
So you probably know each other.
Probably. Well, it depends how. Yeah, exactly.
I like it. A round of applause for Simon, please. Why do you choose to play real tennis, given it's esoteric? It can't be a better game than lawn tennis, or do you think that it is?
It's far better.
Is it really?
Far more intellectually challenging, and it's not just about how hard you hit the ball. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So it's well worth a look on YouTube, because anybody, and also it allows you to play to a much greater age in life than your average tennis player who will require fitness, because it's played on an indoor court, and it's a mix between squash and tennis.
I was about to say it sounds like a mix between squash and tennis. And I think there's one. Is there one at Hampton Court? Is there a court?
There is. The original court is at Hampton Court, built in 1540, something like that.
People, can you still play on it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the busiest courts in the world.
And if I say, I mean, we're talking about the history of tennis. If I were to say David Attenborough, would you know why?
No, that might be a bit incongruous to me in that context.
What colour are the balls in real tennis?
Well, they're green.
Oh, are they?
Greeny yellow, the same as regular lawn tennis balls.
I don't know that they would have always been like that, because I think when David Attenborough was controller of BBC Two, he brought in green tennis balls because of how they looked on the telly.
Right.
No, it's true. Don't laugh.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it's true. I've said it out loud now. It's probably an urban myth, isn't it?
I'm curious. They have been made occasionally in other colours, like pink.
I used to get white ones when I was a kid.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, you're right. You get the multicoloured ones as well for training and stuff like that.
We have a pink pair of real tennis balls, which are, I think, originally Henry VIII's real tennis balls.
Well, you see, yeah, they were pink.
Embossed, and they were embossed with a royal crest. So, because that was the extent they went to. So, and you have to change the real tennis balls get remade about every 2 to 3 weeks. So the professionals, they spend their life literally sewing, because you go through 60 at a time.
Good Lord. Round of applause for Simon, please. I'm standing by my David Attenborough story. I am. I absolutely am. James is in Bishop Stortford. James, question or answer?
I've got an answer.
Carry on.
So it's an answer to the question about can you tell where shells are from?
Yes.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah, I knew it.
So there's sort of geographically distinct sort of isotopic signatures all over the world for certain elements, and carbon is one of them. And when mollusks sort of sequester carbon to create their shells, they draw in these isotopes and they get captured into the shell material.
Yeah,
and then,
so if you've got a mussel in Norfolk and a mussel in Thailand, and they're of the same species, which is, I think, unlikely, but for the purposes of this thought experiment, then it's what they have absorbed in the course of their life cycle that will determine the constitution of the shell, and by knowing that, you will know where the shell has come from.
Yeah, exactly, and it's even more easy to tell with stuff like mollusks, because they don't really move around a lot. You know, they're.
Does that mean there's a map? Is there a database?
I don't know about specific database, but you know, in a lot of research, it's been mapped out to some extent.
I love it. Qualifications?
I have a master's in marine biology that I finally got to use.
I was about to say, that must be a first. A round of applause for James, please. That is pure marine biology, in fact. Mitchell's in Newbury. Mitchell, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Mitchell.
It's to do with the football whistles.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So, I do a bit of refereeing occasionally, and this was something I actually looked into myself a little while ago.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want to look like an idiot on the pitch. But, so there's no kind of specific mentioning in the laws of the game that the whistles need to be kind of different. But usually what you find is there's guidelines, but usually you start the game with one whistle, you do half time with 2 whistles, and then you do full time with 3 whistles. So it's
and you can do a little bit of a flourish yourself, as long as there are 3 distinct whistles. You can do a bit of jazz, because quite often at the end they go whistle, 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 don't they?
Absolutely, but you put your own spin on it. But
so 1, 2, 3, put your own spin on it. I like it. Do you have a little trademark there yourself, Mitchell?
Oh, I just do the standard, long.
I can't blow the whistle down the radio. It's one of those things that sets off dogs and everything. Can't do it, seriously. It's like doing seances.
But there's no official writing of this in the laws of the game.
It's just evolved once, because you've got to know. Listen, I'm not well, I am hurrying you, but only because it's 12:59 and Sheila's here. So quick round of applause for Mitchell. I'm going to give, if she hasn't got one already, I'm going to give the board game to Fanny, because she didn't get an answer to her heats question, and I think that was an absolutely brilliant question. And I know what you're thinking. It should go to the first call, shouldn't it? Because she was so nice. Ren. No, not Ren. Anyway, Fanny. That's it for me for another day. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.